All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the January 28th, 2020 school board meeting in the Shorewood School District. I'd like to first start by adopting the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I would like to table the recreation board update under board governance, item A1. I was unable to attend the last rec meeting, so if we could table that to
The next one?
The next one.
Sure. All right. Any other changes? No? All right. So all in favor of approving the modified agenda? Aye?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, our overarching result for the school district of Shorewood is our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Thanks. Awards and recognitions?
Yes, congratulations to the Shorewood Visual Arts Program, who had a great year at the 2020 Scholastic State Art Awards between SHS and SIS. A total of 48 awards were given out, 24 honorable mentions, 11 silver keys, 13 gold keys, and 1 nomination for the American Visions Award. The work for the gold and silver keys winners can be is displayed at the Schrader Galleria at the Milwaukee Art Museum February 1st through February 15th, and the gold key winners will automatically be entered into the National Scholastic Competition. So to view these extensive list of winners, you can visit our district website. So congratulations to all those students and teachers who participated in that. Also, congratulations to SIS 8th grader James Swenson, who for the second year in a row is the SIS school champion for the National Geographic B. Last year he went on to a 5th place overall at the state competition. So James will now take an online written test to try to qualify for the Wisconsin State Geography B again this year. So we wish him luck. So good luck, James. Congratulations to all of our Shorewood fall sports teams who, according to the Wisconsin Sports Network, were named number 1 among the mid-sized schools for their performances this year. So congratulations. Additionally, Shorewood High School currently sits 5th in the WSN Cup, so the athletic cup, you get points for the amount of conference championships and sectional qualifying, state qualifiers as we go for all of our sports. So this is an honor which honors students, or honors schools to provide and achieve success in the WIA-sponsored sports. Awards total points earned for both the boys and the girls. So great job to all of our student athletes and coaches from the fall sports. So, and that concludes our awards and recognitions for tonight.
Great, thank you. So up first tonight for student achievement and results, we're going to hear about the Pen Pal program at SIS and the French department.
Hello, I was going to say bonjour. Or bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Those are my students. They're going to explain how the Pen Pal program impacted them, and then after this I'm going to do a quick history of the Pen Pal program at SIS. So then the students let you talk, you explain what we're doing in the French class and how in the hand, they have the letters from the Perpal from France. They are in Villemont, France, which is east of Paris, a little city east of Paris. So, you guys, who wants to start? Isn't the microphone?
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
speak into the microphone and state your name?
My name is Daphne Shearburn. I really enjoyed the Pen Pal program because it really helped me to realize that there's people outside of the United States that speak French, and that this is really actually happening, and it really gave me a chance to actually be able to speak French and figure out different phrases and have a conversation with someone in French, even if they're not speaking French back to me. Also, it was really rewarding to just get to talk to someone my age in a different country, and it was just a really exciting experience.
Hi, my name's Amelia Payne, and I feel like something that really helped me was learning classic phrases and how to normally speak to someone in French instead of just basic phrases like, that's a cat. or something like that. It was much easier to just say things that I liked and disliked to someone that was my age, like Daphne just said.
My name is Hatem, and this project impacted me, but like it really it pushed my French skills to their limits, and like I got like kind of like forced to use like all my skills that I learned over the 2 years, and yeah.
My name is Xavier, and this pen pal program has definitely helped me learn, and I talked with my pen pal on WhatsApp too, and that was good. And it helped me learn phrases and stuff.
I'm sorry, did you say that you used WhatsApp
Yeah, I used
with your
WhatsApp.
pen pal?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Cool.
So, yeah. So what's happening is like, and maybe you guys can just give some letter to the public to see. So take a box and then have them look at the letter. So what's happening is not just now we're going to talk about the history of the pen pal program, and I know it's going to be just 10 minutes. Is it okay? 10 minutes? Okay. So about 5 years ago, I decided to do a pen pal program because I thought that learning from the activity sheets and stuff like this in the book is not very effective because the students, they really want to visualize this, and then having somebody their age that is authentic, that you can talk to. So then first I went to, at first the pen pal program was in Martinique, which is an island next to, I'm going to go there down first, next to, in the Caribbean, right there, here. I chose this place because first I was born in that place and it's not the place. and also because of the timeline, I could do FaceTime because it's only 2 hours ahead. So then I went there and met with the teachers. This is her class, and this is me and her. And I brought some goggles and stuff like this as the student did. So then, and then she was stationed. How do you say that? She was stationed to a different school, and now she's in Paris, France. But we really connected so well. She's very dynamic, like me. You know, oh, let's do this, let's just try this. And so then we continue to do the pen pal, but this time in France, in Métropole, which is right here. So Villemont is right here, which is right here. And then for the activities that we do at first, at the beginning, the first or second quarter, the students are writing letters to each other, which is what they get, so you have some sample. And the students are always amazed by the way that the pen pal, it's not just a letter, but they write cursive and then a different type of paper, and then they say, oh my gosh, look at how they write. So they right away connected with another culture, just by the paper and the ways that they're writing. And then, so every year, I try to have a big project besides the letter. Right now, my students are communicating via WhatsApp, so they back and forth. We're still able to do some FaceTime, but just in the morning because 6 hour differences. So my first hours are able to do FaceTiming. And then not only this, but we also, with the teacher, we also exchange video. So I'm going to show you. There we go.
Wow.
So I love technology.
Fancy.
So then with WhatsApp, and the teacher is Chloe, which is that teacher. We send video of, this is a student from France. It's not playing. Okay, hold on, let me try this again. Maybe it's not going to work. So, okay, let's try this one more time. So beside this, we have video back and forth, like they introducing themselves. No, it's not working. But that's okay. So, my student, that's not a big deal. So, but they get to see and hear students from France and okay. So we do a lot of back and forth video, like what do you eat during Thanksgiving? So I send video, a picture, and then stuff like that. And so my students, besides this, they have big projects. So the first year, we did some regular video, and then you can watch it on your own time because so the first year that was your year with the cucumber.
Yeah.
I remember that. I
Video,
the
right?
video here, so then you can look at the video of the student that was 2016, 2017, and then this is the letters of the students. So if you want to see the letters that they wrote
There was a bunch
this
of different
year.
videos.
And those are the students from Martinique, so they sent back some video of look at our school, so describing the school, our school, and then and then we did the 360 videos. This is the making of the 360 video, and why this is. So I kind of took to the journal, the video journal of that video, like how they make this.
Laissez-moi.
So those are the students from France, and like I said, just go to my website and you can see watch all those videos because it don't take long. But if you want to see, so the students have like a director, a script writer. There was a whole thing to do this, and then I'm going to show you what the result of what they did. So you guys, you want to put this in there? It's already all set. You do this, and then put it in, and then you can watch in there. So then the students this year wanted the pen pair to be virtually in SIS. So like this is sitting at school in France, and then they are actually, and this is what they did. So I'm going to.
No, I feel like that too.
So when it's ready, can you put it in there? And you open up, and then you push and you really get it in there. So now this year, so far, so if you go to my website, you can just scan the QR code and see that experience here. And but this year, so far we have the letter, we have the back and forth video that we send it to each other. And then my 7th grader did a Voki for the pen pair. So this is the example, this is me. And then because we're doing the unit on identity.
Hello, my name is Annette Corton. I am a French teacher at Shorewood School District. Have fun at the French class. See you soon. Goodbye.
So then this is the computer generated voice, but this is my voice. You can do both ways. So I show them the two ways to do this.
Bonjour et j'espère que vous allez vous enregistrer pour le voyage de Québec, qui est un voyage fantastique, qui sera inoubliable pour vous.
So then the students this year, my 7th graders, what they did, and I'm starting to upload them because it just happened last week. So they sent a Voki to the painter that the painter will be able to watch those Voki via my website. So this is, and it totally look like that kid.
Je m'appelle, j'ai 12 ans. J'habite à Sherbrooke, j'habite dans une maison. Je parle anglais. Je suis américain et je viens de l'Amérique. J'aime regarder la télévision, je n'aime pas les framboises. Ma couleur préférée est le bleu et mon jour préféré est le vendredi. Ma matière préférée est le français. Je suis content. Ma saison préférée est l'été. Au revoir.
So instead of to do an activity sheet, like so boring, so they do this, then they know that it is for the painter. So they talk about what they like, what they don't like, and blah blah blah. So like I said, you can go to my website and see all this, I'm logging in. My 8th grader, because we're doing a unit on food, so they're doing a video blog on what they eat every day. And this is in the making, so because the French students are making also a video blog for them. So it's going to be the exchange of video blog. And my 7th grader did also show and tell, so they brought maybe Xavier, you can explain the show and tell?
Yeah, we all just brought just things from our homes, and we showed them and talked about them in French.
They brought something from home, something that we present them, and then they say, okay, this is, and then doing these activities, they learn the expression ça c'est, because they're very beginners, and then they were just telling the pen pair what it is, why they like this object. So we did a show and tell, and then we did book writing. So for the pen pair, so this is a book. There was That was last year. So we write a book, and this year we're going to also write a book and about Wisconsin. We're going to write a book about Wisconsin, and my students are going. My students are going to make a box to mail to the pen pal about all the things that represent Wisconsin. So we were brainstorming, and they said cheese. I said yes, but we have to send a plastic toy cheese because we cannot send real cheese. And then they're going to make a video and explain, okay, this is a cheese because Wisconsin is a dairy state. All this in French. So we're going to mail that box along with the video to the pen pal to explain what it is to be Wisconsin. So that's a project for this year, because this year we have a project. And so the book, and then finally they did the picture album describing the family, and then this is like a video like at the restaurant like the other student did. But then finally I'm going to show you this, and then is it not working? I'm going to do it with my phone. Oh, this one. I'm just going to do this one because sometimes the website this one. So this one is really cool because it's a video actually, and this a VR video. It's not just a picture. So let me see the metaverse. And those was like a seed. I really wrote a lot of grants to get all the technologies that I needed to do that kind of teaching, because then it's just like I love teaching that kind of teaching. So Seed helped me a lot with this. So thank you, Seed. I don't know if you can see that.
Thank you, Seed. Doesn't happen without yours.
Yes, thank you, Seed. Okay, I'm going to do with mine. So here we go. I have one. So easy. And I can put it in one set. So the kids are now, using WhatsApp and other media to communicate with the pen pal. I don't know, it's not going through. I don't know. It works in my room, but I don't know what's going on here. Something like that, isn't it?
Always.
Okay, so but you can see the regular one, but just looking at my phone. Okay, so here we go. You can just pass it around, and then there's a sound and everything is not going through. So that's pretty much the pen pal program. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
I have one very important question for Daphne. Do you guys ever talk about mountain biking with your pen pals? No? Ask who
Wait.
Julian Absalon is and see what they tell you.
I don't know. Now I'm missing the camera.
Now, I just want to just comment that particularly for the 7th graders, so everyone except for Hatam and Daphne are new beginners, and you're able to write letters just after, a semester, which is quite impressive. So, Hatam, this is your 3rd language, right?
Yeah.
So how is it? Is it easier, do you think, to learn the 3rd language?
Yeah. It's easier than the 2nd language.
Yeah?
And then to help them to respond to your question, to help them write letters, I have we describe Lady Gaga. So then all the questions, yeah, because I thought everybody knows Lady Gaga. So then after this, they use a sentence how to do, and then they have this guide to help them because they're really beginners to help them write letters. So once they have talk about your hair, talk about this, and then you can combine everything as a paragraph here. And that paragraph, you will put it in your letter. So that's the process of doing your letter.
So Xavier, do you ever just WhatsApp with your pen pal outside of class?
Yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, you guys are in 7th and 8th grade, right? So what's interesting about 7th and 8th grade in France that's really different than what you guys are doing?
They have like the schools are really different there, and they have like I'm not sure, but alright, like we learn like the schools are like really different and like more focused about like learning, more like here it's like most like over there it's like more strict kind of, and like it's more focused on learning, and here it's like more focused on like like just general stuff.
I know that their lunches are longer. They're like 2 hours.
Maybe I need to VR with the board members there.
Yeah.
They have really long lunches.
Oh, that's nice.
I know that they can like schedule like breaks in between their day, and like their classes are really flexible.
They also spend a lot of time on handwriting and making sure that their letters look really nice. Because I'm not sure, maybe it's just our school, but I haven't really seen a lot of schools that do handwriting classes.
Thank you.
Have any of you thought about studying in France? And I think the high school has, and you take students to Quebec.
Yes, I take students to Quebec, the 8th graders every year to Quebec, and it's a very amazing experience because they stay with a family, with a Quebec family, so they have a mom and dad from Quebec and siblings same age from Quebec, so that's really nice. And then during the day we do like a lot of activities, and it's really cool. It's a cool trip. Yeah.
And then I'd be remiss not to plant the seed of studying abroad for an extended period of time once you're in high school through AFS. I have to put that plug in. It makes a difference. We're hosting a student right now from Japan who's 17 years old and living with us and experiencing Shorewood as a Japanese student. You could go and live in France and mountain bike, and I'm sure Clark would be happy. Or live in Martinique, or live in Senegal. You could live in any number of places. So think about studying abroad at some point for an extended period of time.
And we do a lot of eating in the classroom, like this week. Say what we did about learning how to use. Yeah. So it was torture for them.
We learned a lot about etiquette and how we have to like cut every piece of food like in like a certain way, and like manners, and like we had king cake this last week, and we had a crepe party, and we had grilled cheese, yeah.
And then not only I have them do this, but I have them use a fork and a knife. The fork with the left hand and the knife, and I show them how to cut, and then not to switch hand to eat, but to eat with this, and then videotape them and send that to the pen pal. And they say, don't film me. I don't want that. I'm starving my food. But I said it's good to show them the difference. So this whole week we ate, so they had like so I made grilled cheese sandwiches, and then.
Isn't that proper etiquette? Like, doesn't everyone eat like that?
Proper, it's just different. Because then I don't want to judge. It's just like in France it's like this, but here it's different.
Yes.
It's not proper, it's just different.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, guys. Thank you
you.
so much for
Great
coming.
job.
And before, I just want to mention my website if you want to see all the projects. It's sisfrench.com. So you can just go there and see everything.
Great, thank you so much.
Good job.
All right. And then we can collect the letters. Ramasser les lettres.
Next time I'll have to request some crepes as part of the meeting. Sadie, are you on that video? Are you in that video?
I think I am actually.
Go back and check it out.
I don't really remember what it is, quite honestly. I remember doing it.
Okay. So up next is our first opportunity for public comments. There'll be 2 more. No? Yes?
So Janet Greiline, 2016 East Menlo, and all the kids have disappeared, but I am here to tell you that my German pen pal from my high school German class is still one of my dearest friends. We visit, we talk, we share messages, and we've been to each other's weddings and taken pictures, and our kids have vacationed together. I'm telling you, it is lovely. Thank you.
All right. So then up next is some reports on district operations. And we're going to start with a report on our new partnership with Children's Hospital.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's really hard to believe that we are in our mid-year review of this. It went by really fast, and we've really done a lot of work, and it's really good work that's happening. So really looking at the things that we started really related to our student services team getting together and meeting bi-weekly from September until really now, and we're meeting monthly at this point. But that was really important to develop the relationships, and our partners from Children's have been part of that process. So I'm going to start by letting them reintroduce themselves to you so we remember who everybody is at the table, and then we can open it up for any questions you might have related to the executive summary.
Great. I'm Dr. Mayel Chafel. I'm a psychologist with Children's, and I am the consultant for the grant.
Hi, I'm Tracy Order. I'm the Director of Mental and Behavioral Health Services for Community Programs at Children's.
So with that, we did prepare an executive summary for you to review, and if there's any questions specifically related to the activities that have been completed so far, we'd like to answer those questions if there are any.
Yeah. I can start. I had a question about the staff wellness survey. So I think, when we first talked to you, I guess 4 months ago now, we were really thinking about like the services that are going to be provided to students. And so can you talk a little bit about kind of this additional service that you're going to be providing our staff?
So as far as the grant goes, that's more, I think, going to indirectly impact students. Our therapeutic services with our therapists in the elementary schools and in the intermediate and high school will more like directly impact the students because they'll meet one-on-one with them. So with the staff, we're going to do both PDs and then try to do some staff wellness activities. So the survey was sort of a first step to identify what the staff wanted, what they're already doing, what they're needing, what we can enhance. Coming from Children's, and then to plan with Shorewood staff as well.
The DPI grant that that Shorewood received, not us, is originally for non-clinical and non-direct face-to-face services, and so that's where all of the professional development and staff wellness comes in to support the educators that are supporting the children. The direct clinical services that we've also started about a month ahead of schedule are what we then tailed in on the tailwinds of that grant to be able to support all of it, everyone.
Great. And we did include a question. There's also a lot of research to back this up as well. But we included a question on that staff wellness survey of how likely do you think that staff wellness is impacting student outcomes? And it was a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being very likely. And I think the average across all staff who took it, which was 90, was 4.1. So staff are acknowledging that how well I'm feeling. And this is true of all of us, right? Of how well I'm feeling is going to impact how well I'm probably going to be able to feel at work and to do my job, and that's impacting student outcomes at the end.
Great, thank you.
I'm very impressed that you've been able to start a month and a half early in terms of referrals, and I'm wondering how many hours per week are our professionals from Children's or Aurora with us, and how is that for sustainability and.
So there's a couple questions in there. Catch me if I missed any of them.
Sure.
our two therapists, one at the two elementary schools and one at the SIS and SHS, are both full-time, and they split their time
Okay.
technically 50-50 between the two schools.
Mhm.
They see about, I would say they have a capacity for about 20 to 22 or so hours per week of direct clinical services, and then the rest of that is some of the contacts with parents and consultation with teachers. That's our average on our standard. Sometimes it can just go up and down a little bit because summers it gets a little bit slower, so we really, you know, during the school years, clearly our busy time, and then we are available during the summers for anybody that needs services over the summer.
So folks will be available in school, so families can continue coming.
Yes,
for
that is the
service.
intent.
Excellent.
So have you received any of the feedback from the folks that are benefiting from the services? I'm thinking more of on the child side, like families. Have you been getting some feedback at least on how it's working? Anything that we need to think about maybe even improving on?
So we haven't received a lot of specific feedback from families. Therapy just got up and running recently with
Right.
our students. As far as the process goes, we do have a process, a referral process that we developed together as a team. And so essentially, I think that what's happening with that process of identification of concerns, it really goes to our counselors or psychologists, and then that's forming a relationship that's deeper rooted with the families. So I think those types of things are really important, and then we're connecting with children's staff so they can then provide that service. So it's really a lot of networking. So my guess is that there's a lot of positive feedback coming back from that process with the school staff, but we haven't heard that at this level yet.
How do you feel about the level of communication that we've had to our families? Do you think that we're getting the word out there enough, or is there something that we need to do to even, because I'm really excited about this program, and I wanted to make sure that that people understand that it is available.
Right, and so in the executive summary, I commented about the community relationships and the communication that we've been doing with the community. And so there was a flyer that was put together early in the process that Maggie put together in conjunction with our team for the student services team. And this was actually presented at the parent-teacher conferences, and then there was staff there to be able to discuss it with the parents as well. So that's one piece. This project was also, I guess partnership, I don't call it a partnership, not a project, was also featured in the Shorewood Today, and there was a lot of emphasis regarding this work. So we've been trying to get the information out, and our counselors and our teachers and everybody are having conversations as needs arise. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
So I think particularly, so we've had a parent group, and I mean, I'll be honest, we had great attendance the first day. We've not had good attendance since then at Atwater, which I think is in part because of the winter, but in part because we need to advertise differently. And so I think one of the things we've talked about is maybe partnering with the PTO to just go directly to the parents and ask, what would you like from us? Because we're here to serve you. So how can we help you, and what is that going to look like for you? So that's one of our ideas. And then we've also talked at SHS, and I'm sure we'll have the same conversations at the other schools, but how are we going to communicate directly to the students, if that's in announcements or flyers or posters? But you know, so, I mean, children are capable of saying, hey, I need help as well, so I think we can do better.
Right, that's
at
what
that
that's
as
where
well.
my next question was going to go, was what can we do to make sure the kids know that you're there too? Because my guess is you would have to communicate with them a little bit differently, right?
Bingo. Especially in the high school. So I asked my daughters, I said, well, have you met the new therapist yet? And they said, no.
What new therapist?
So I said, all right, so what do we do? Give us some ideas. And they rattled off five ideas at the dinner table, like assemblies. And they didn't like my idea necessarily of rounding through the homerooms, because there's a lot of them. They call them homerooms anymore? Or yeah, okay. Boy, that just dated me. And doing some more just kind of communication so that students are aware, because I think I just read it in the newsletter, last week's newsletter, that there was a little blurb about therapy services available. I'm the parent, so you're right, we're working on that.
Okay.
And high schools are kind of naturally a little bit harder.
Sure.
To get a little started up, but yeah, if you guys have any ideas as well for how we can communicate. Yes.
Actually, I was just going to turn to these guys and
ask
ask
could
us
work
to
if they
help
just
with
walked in and said, hi, I'm here, just so people know. I mean, it's simple as that, right? Knowing that they exist. You know?
Have you met Alicia yet?
I've not.
Okay, there we go.
Do you know where her office is?
Nope.
I know Alicia has been to a Red Gen meeting, so she has met that group. And I have had students, my office is in the administration building. Some students have wandered in there, so I do tell them who I am.
So is that something you could work with the clubs to spread the word that way too?
Yeah.
My other questions were asked, I think, but I wondered on the staff wellness piece, if, I don't know if this is you, Dr. Davis, or somebody at the table, but how that emerged as a priority, and then if you could talk a little bit about how we're defining that, because that's a big,
Yeah, so I can start. Where it emerged as a priority is as we had our district leadership team this summer doing some work around what priorities they would like to see. Staff wellness was one of the things that came out. And so that along with our emerging partnership at that point with Children's, we thought that was a really nice marriage, knowing that we had some opportunities for professional development and some exploration. So that's really where it started. And then through a couple of times where we've had full district-wide in-services, so on the 20th was our last one, we've had an opportunity to have Maggie in front of the group and talk about potential services and options. And then the idea is that the survey and the themes from the survey then will drive some of the action steps moving forward. And those will likely be at a building level. And so taking those to the building leadership teams and saying, what are some activities we could do here at Lake Bluff or Atwater, SIS or SHS as kind of building level kind of staff wellness pieces, knowing that those are the spaces and people that you're with all the time. I think that was the idea. So I don't know, Maggie, did you have anything?
No, I think that sounds about right. So so I meet with each of the school teams every other week, and so we'll kind of go over the themes from the survey and say, hey, what are you already doing? What are some other things that you want to do based on these survey results? Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, what's the time frame just in that vein? Because you said that you did the completed staff development at Atwater. What is the time frame for the other 3 buildings for what was done at Atwater?
For the staff PD?
Yeah.
So we had, I think in December, maybe some in late November, we had our meet and greets where we just explained the partnership again. And then at the high school and the intermediate school, their staff development is happening once a month at their staff meetings.
Okay.
And then for Lake Bluff and Atwater, those are happening. We are partnering with Nate Schultz, and they both have in their work plans, they have goals that for the faculty learning targets align really well with the services that we're able to provide. I think they're both around helping the teachers support their students around emotion identification and coping skills. And so during their PD cycles, we're coming in to provide support around that. And I think particularly at Lake Bluff, we just had a planning meeting this week. We're going to help them create lessons for their morning cruise. So the first one, I think that I'm going over is March 4th, and the first kind of unit is emotion identification. So we're helping them with that PD cycle, and then Atwater's starts, I think, April and May, but they have a very similar goal, so we're going to help with that. So we try to, the tricky thing is everybody wants this information, but the schedule is so busy, so we kind of try to figure it in as best we can. And the staff meeting PDs at the high school and intermediate school we're calling them mini PDs. They're meant to be like 15, 20 minutes and be very applicable. And then we'll provide some resources you can take away as well.
on the staff wellness piece, is there a particular focus? Like, I guess I'm wondering in terms of like how are we defining wellness? Are we thinking about, fitness? Are we focusing on sleep? Are we focusing on stress management? All of the above? Like, it seems like, how are you kind of grabbing a foothold there?
That's a good point, because wellness means a lot of things. I think all those topics were mentioned in the survey. I think we're going to have to determine maybe what at a district level can we combine resources, do like things like can we bring a speaker in for physical health, but what are some more practical things that we can do at school within the school day. People really wanted activities that were scheduled within the school day or after school. People do not want to come before school. People don't want to do a book study about work stuff. They want to do a fun book study. I think we'll try to provide a range of things, because wellness to one person, means like yoga and exercise, but to somebody else it means walking in nature, or it means I just need to talk to a friend and vent, right? So I think it's going to be providing a variety of activities, but also having people spend some time reflecting about what does wellness mean to you, right? Because we're all adults, so that's, we're going to provide activities, but we also want you to be a little bit responsible as well for, figuring out what's going to be wellness for you. But I think as as people that are supporting educators. I think people also wanted to, it's hard to define how to do this, but we want to convey to them that it's okay to focus on your wellness and it's okay to take time to do that. So I think that's part of the wellness kind of plan overall. Like, we can't tell people what wellness means, but we want you to be figuring out what it means for yourself and how can we support you with that. It's hard to define though, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of that vicarious trauma work that you do in the curricula kind of helps folks address all the stress and kind of just how caregivers, teachers and the like absorb a lot of that, the student experience and the stress and everything that they're experiencing. And so a lot of what Dr. Alscheifel does and how we do this throughout our schools addresses just that. So recognizing your own limits and stress levels and then customizing it according to what your definition of wellness is.
So therapy hasn't started at the high school officially, right? You're not, according to this, you're still working through some of the referrals and things, or are you you're physically seeing children at the high school?
I'm not the therapist at the high school.
Right.
Alicia is, yes.
You're not,
she
but
is.
she is.
Yes, she has had therapy sessions and intake sessions, yes.
So now that we have seen students, elementary school and here, I'm wondering if, and maybe it's too early to tell, but is this sort of what we expected in terms of usage? Or were we expecting more students to use the services? This gets back a little bit to our conversation about making sure students and families know about it. So are you feeling good as to how it's rolled out so far, being early and all those things?
Yes, we are. So we're in almost 50 schools across the state, and we've kind of learned a pattern of how that first year goes, and it differs by every school culture, the readiness of the school, the parents, the community. This community has been ready, the school's been ready, and sometimes it does seem like it's a little bit slow anywhere, because that first year is that whole relationship building piece and getting to know that there is a mental health professional that's available, and that's helping reduce the stigma of it all as well, having that person be part of the school personnel. So yes, the elementary school started up a little faster, and that's again kind of normal just because of the age group and how quickly we can engage the kids and the families. A little bit more high school is that communication and getting the students and the parents both aware of the services and then initiating or more helping with the facilitation of initiation. So we're very pleased that we were able to start early thanks to obtaining space and furnishing it and starting to get that whole process up from the ground and getting those referrals in.
Well, I appreciate the update, and I hope that if there are things as we continue to roll out and scale up, that if we can support or do, that you let us know.
Yeah, and I look forward to hearing the next update because it feels like we're just beginning now. So
yeah, well, thanks for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, Sam Coleman is going to give us an update on the website questions and concerns portal.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As described in the executive summary that was submitted, there were about 20 entries with the online portal. I want to just give a little bit of background information. I know we discussed the launch of the portal in our October board meeting, but just wanted to, again, give a little background for those who may not have had an opportunity to receive the information from that meeting, that the online portal was the result, or largely result of many members from the diversity work group who acknowledged that there were difficulties in communicating with either district administration or looping principals in on those conversations when concerns arise and maybe this disconnect between just what the processes toward resolutions look like. And so this online portal created an opportunity to increase the communication that the district has with community members, students, and stakeholders who might have questions or concerns. And then it also allows for that communication to be shared with the appropriate district administrators as well, so that if there's a concern pertaining to athletics, our athletics director would be connected or copied on that. If there was a concern related to curriculum, that's something our C&I director would be copied on. And so it just allowed us an opportunity to increase the communication and to be more coordinated in our responses to inquiries or concerns that community members or stakeholders might have. One of the recommendations, as mentioned in the executive summary, is some loop closure being added to that, and that would be should an inquiry or concern be submitted, that it is also met with a resolution summary that's uploaded by whomever that district administrator might be, and then that will then prompt a satisfaction measure type of survey that we can send out to the person who posed the question, just to gauge their level of satisfaction with the resolution, and then for us to have better record of maybe the length of time that resolution took or steps that were required along the way.
So can I ask, like, when you use the word resolution,
Mhm.
so like what does that mean?
Yeah. Maybe resolution is not the best word. In Infinite Campus, that would be the response. So the official response that addresses a concern or inquiry. So it might not be a resolution. It may be, for example, there were questions about where to purchase tickets for a theater. So the resolution or the response that resolved the concern, I guess, that's what I'm thinking about. But there certainly have been more complex inquiries that have come through that there's one item actually that remains unresolved, and because there's a series of conversations that will have to happen over time with an academic department. And so I've been using the word resolution, but there might be a better word to use to describe like a response that satisfies the inquiry.
Yeah, and I just feel like there's a big difference between like a very much like a informational question versus a process or decision question that has, like you just said, multiple components to it. I just am wondering, because when you say complete, like, I guess when I hear resolution, it means that it's been closed. But then, like, so I don't know. I think it's something just to consider in thinking about how you categorize some of the inquiries that come in.
Okay.
I was actually going to have a question about the resolution summaries, and I think you kind of clarified some of it a little bit, Sam, when you clarified the difference between a resolution and a response. But is there a way that at some point we will see, I don't want to share too much, right? Because some of this, we don't want to share it publicly, but is there a way that we're going to start, once we get the volume, start to categorize the types, to Haru's point?
Yeah, I'm certain there is. I think right now, where we report that information out to currently is here at the board, and then at our diversity work group, and some of the and in both spaces, those are very public spaces where we want to like think critically about what type of information we might be sharing or who might be posing questions. But I'm sure there is a way to categorize that protects the identity of people who are submitting concerns. I'll think through that, and I'll connect with Mickey, our IT director, to figure out ways we could do that.
Okay. I would say naturally in our governance process, if we were to look at like OE9 for communicating with public, if that's something that we wanted to if we wanted to expect a report on an annual basis, we could write that into one of our operational expectations, and then annually, then you would get a report that could have that type of categorization. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be a request that you would do. You just can predict of when that's going to come up. That would be a way.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because I don't want it to be just numbers, right? This is how many we got, and this is how many the type.
Right. I think that doesn't give you any information.
And
really.
I've dealt with this in before to say, people don't want to see, I had 10 HR complaints. They want to see what types of complaints they were, and then give some sort of idea on, well, how did you answer or resolve that concern that somebody raised, and obviously I can help with that as needed. So.
Kelly, can you just keep a note for that for me? Thanks.
I think maybe one other piece is the communication about the portal. So that information was shared. Information about the portal was shared to staff members. It is not my understanding, and Dr. Davis, correct me if I'm wrong, if there was a specific and isolated message or communication that went out to families about the portal. I know that there are some families who are still learning about it, and so another recommendation in that executive summary was around ways that we can continue to communicate to community members. It was in the village the village manager's memo and some of those pieces. But I'm wondering if there are other ways we can communicate that that such a portal exists. It's under the Contact Us tab, so it's where most schools or organizations would have this type of opportunity to communicate. But I'm wondering if more people knew about it, it would be utilized at a different rate.
Is it on, I know it's on the district page under Contact Us, is it on each individual school page as well?
Should be. Yeah, I'd have to look at it just to make sure.
I mean,
so.
I'm looking and I don't, because
Under the
I'm
Contact Us.
probably an odd duck that I go to the district page more than the average parent.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking most parents probably go to their
To the
school
school.
page
Mhm.
versus the district page. And I
So
don't,
regardless of which school you click on, you always have the
Should be
tab at
able
the
to-
top which says Contact Us,
Yeah.
and it's the third one, submit question or
It'd be
concern.
still would be across the top.
I guess, I just don't know that.
Do any of
Yeah,
the social
fair point, but
sorry.
no, I'm done.
Do any
Sorry.
of the social media accounts have easy links to that area? So, you know how we use the district Facebook account to announce football games and things like that. I'm not suggesting we announce this every day, but maybe there's a way to do that. I mean, what I hear, Sam, is this isn't the only thing that people who aren't on Infinite Campus don't get.
Right.
Right. And we tried the village managed memo and all that stuff. That's great. I think that'll help. But maybe there's a way to do it that
What-
way as well.
And maybe one of the things that we're going to talk about later is things we want to do at linkages. Is there's probably a
Right.
list of things that we should be talking about at linkages, like some of these things that we're talking about tonight,
Right.
to
Yeah.
just let more people know.
Mhm.
Right.
So there was talk. I remember when this first came up that there was going to be like a pop-up type thing. Like this was modeled after MPS's,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably multiple ways to do it depending on how you think like people navigate a website. And so Mickey's probably the person to ask about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and in our debrief tomorrow, I'll make sure to bring that up and address that. I think that's important to consider. I mean, and ultimately, what we want to do is just increase the level of access folks have to district administration or school administration if the access is working. I mean, we don't have a way to gauge that or not, but if the level of access is satisfactory as it exists right now between parents and community members in schools at the school level or at the district level, we just want to add another way. I mean, there could be other ways as well, but this point specifically was to just increase that. And I think it's worth being careful or being cautious not to miss the opportunity for some of that face-to-face contact as well if there are concerns folks have to bring that directly to a principal or administrator. And so we want to continue to encourage that too.
Well, and don't be discouraged by the volume. We honestly don't know what to expect from this type of thing just yet.
Right.
It's unique to each time you set one of these up. It's going to be unique to the environment and the community that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And also something to keep in mind that your volumes are probably going to be a little bit slower with a line like this because some people are going to think it's a hotline or a helpline, and we require people to divulge their name and who they are so that we can respond to them appropriately. And that part of it tends to turn people off a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't know where it's going to go because their name's attached to it. So eventually that will go away. But to your point, we got to figure out ways to communicate that it's out there, and then we'll hope to see that the volume goes up and that the resolution of those concerns or those requests or those whatever the case may be gets a little bit more systematic for you.
Yeah, I received that. And if the volume stays the same, then that might mean we're doing a good job at communicating.
It was always meant to be one way, right?
Yes.
I
Right.
assume that,
Right.
all
One
the
of
other
many
ways
tools.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
that
one
people
of
are
many.
con-
Yep.
yeah, so.
And it's
Could you, Sam, perhaps share, are there cases, I know it hasn't been up and running that long, about a direct connection to like student success? I know the impetus behind this was parental concern, but ultimately, how have some of these complaints translated into like an improvement of services and connections to students?
Well, I think and that would probably be an example of one of the more complex inquiries that come through the portal, and that's one that, again, is kind of in work right now, and that is with an academic department and a CNI inquiry. So that's an example that I think is directly related to improving an approach or structure that directly impacts student success. I want to be careful not to speak too much on it because it's still in motion, but I think that is probably one of the best examples of a parent reaching out to a school in the district saying, I have a concern about or a question about curriculum. Can we start a conversation? And with this conversation, rethink or think broader about our approach in this way. So to date, that would probably be the one that is directly related to student success or learning. The others have largely been around questions about the calendar or questions about how to access information, schedules, where to go for open enrollment, some of those types of questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Stay there for a second.
All right.
And then last kind of report. So last time we met, we talked about district plans to honor Black Lives Matter, and also wanted to get an update on some of the Black History Month events that are happening. So if you wanted to give us an update on that.
Yep. So I want to thank the board, thank Dr. Davis. Amy's not here tonight, but also Amy and Dr. Stevens for the conversation last week that allowed us to enter a space within these couple weeks in between to think about ways that we can acknowledge the spirit of Black Lives Matter Week at school, and then to have some meaningful activities or even ways that we can acknowledge Black Lives Matter Week that has a direct impact on how students and families experience school throughout the year and not just isolated in 1 week. And so there are, but specifically to talk through some of the ways Black Lives Matter at Schools Week will be acknowledged and celebrated as a start. And then planning will go forward to just continue to improve this in years to come. But as a start, I wanted to mention this is not a school-related event specifically, but it's a school and community partnership, and it's with Shorewood Moving Forward. So there's an event this Sunday, at the Shorewood Public Library, and that is a way to kind of launch the Black Lives Matter at School Week with a school and community partnership. And so we've invited our teachers, students, schools, and community members to be a part of that. And then there's information posted on that throughout the community as well. Then going into Black Lives Matter at Schools Week, there's work that Dr. Davis, Amy, and I acknowledged is important for us to do with our teachers and with our staff. Just naming that there's a real fear with talking about race and racial justice and racial equity, a fear that teachers have. And it's a legitimate fear based on past experiences or hesitation of not having enough information or possibly misspeaking. And so what we want to do next week is for principals, with the support of Dr. Davis and I, to have conversations and staff meetings next week, and principals to be able to lead those conversations with their teachers around Black Lives Matter Week, what it means, the significance of it, and ways to talk about race and racial justice at age-appropriate levels within the schools. And so we will do that. We'll have that conversation with our teachers next week after they meet with Dr. Davis and principals meet with Dr. Davis and I. Additionally, we discussed a book list, poetry and literature list that will be provided to all teachers to use, not just during Black Lives Matter Week, but again throughout the year, and a way for culture and racial diversity to be implemented and integrated in the curriculum and throughout lessons throughout the year. And then lastly, the opportunity to remain ongoing with our teachers, and we kind of started some of this work in our professional development, is to give an explicit focus to building teacher confidence and competence with having discussions about race, and then communicating that in ways with families, so that as the conversations at schools are happening, there's some connection or follow-up with families, so that parents can either support those conversations or have questions, answers should students go home and say, like, hey, today we talked about injustice in the criminal justice system. What do you think about that? We want parents to be on the same page about like why we be having these conversations. I know in our previous meeting, the discussion was around a resolution, and a resolution to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter Week is an important week, and it's a week to notice and to give attention to some very real concerns across the nation, in schools, and in communities pertaining to Black lives. And I think moving forward, and as we kind of evolved in that conversation, the suggestion is not that the resolution is an idea that we don't want to move forward with. It's understanding that right now, for us to give some substance to what we're acknowledging, and for us to, I guess in essence, make good on any promises that we might be acknowledging, that we actually have the capacity, the confidence, and the preparation to at least even enter a discussion and begin that work. And so that's where we want to start, and I think a place where we want to aspire to get to is being able to say we acknowledge, we agree, and we affirm with the 4 demands of Black Lives Matter at Schools Week, and then here are some specific, targeted, strategic ways that we are acknowledging and honoring those.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Brian and Amy, and everyone for kind of regrouping and thinking through how to move forward. And so I appreciate that. I appreciated the honesty and conversations at the last board meeting. I'm curious, though, and I really like the idea of the literature lists for teachers, and I'm wondering how or if that can be shared with families as well.
Yep.
Because to your point about how parents talk to kids or how to respond to kids when they come home and say they talked about this. I think just to increase the community conversation about what we're doing, to share some of that with families would be helpful. So I'm not sure if that was considered, but I hope it is, so that books can be read at home that might be read in school, and have those conversations can continue.
We will certainly do that.
Are you the person supporting the Youth Rising Up programming as well next month in February?
No, that would be Sam and Nelson, I believe, who's taking the leadership on that. I mean, I'm supporting it, but I'm not leading that work. Sorry.
So
yes,
do we have a
supporting, not
list
leading.
of those events as well?
So we have, I think the featured event is February 13th. It's 13th, the performance, at 7 o'clock at night at the SHS Auditorium. So that's the Black History Month presentation by Youth Rising Up. Beyond that, I didn't have a list specifically at this point. I didn't touch base with Nelson on that. That's something that we can get out on the website too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be important to share, again, like in terms of communication. I've seen 2 things about the Black History Month thing on Facebook, but it's because of parents whose kids I think are involved in it, not like it's coming from the district at this point.
Yeah. Sure.
So, just making sure people know about those events as well.
Right. Yeah. And there are a couple of other, so teacher, and I also don't want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there are several teachers throughout the district who have reached out to me and who are working with some of our community partners through Shorewood moving forward to acknowledge Black Lives Matter at Schools Week in their classroom. I'm actually speaking to a couple of classes here at SIS and then at Atwater next during Black Lives Matter at Schools Week as well. So there are teachers who are kind of on their own or with the support of other teachers, the support of my office, doing some of the work. But what we want to do is, to your point, be able to strategically and across the system have an approach and then be able to communicate that approach to the public. And so right now, what we haven't communicated what a systems or district level approach to supporting Black Lives Matter Week at school would be yet, but that is something that we will certainly acknowledge during that week.
Great, thank you.
I just have one last question. The mentorship program that you have going on at SIS.
Yes.
Has that been a topic of discussion? Did those kids had some ideas about how they wanted to uniquely celebrate it somehow? Or?
Yeah, so we looked at the Black Lives Matter at Schools Week website as a part of one of our Monday sessions. And so there's a prompt on the website that, in summary, it asks students to respond to, ideally, what would it look like if Black Lives Matter at schools to you? So what does that mean to you? And so it created some really powerful dialogue, some really powerful reflection. Most of the students initially wrote what their response would be. So Black Lives Matter at schools when, and then they would give a response. And so they would say, when we feel Black culture and identity is celebrated throughout the year, or we have teachers and staff who look like us, who we can identify with. So there was some of that, but then there's also some art pieces that students are creating during the week of Black Lives Matter School Week. So to be able to connect that that expression or that reflection to some form of art. So as that work continues, and we'll present some of that at the Shorewood Moving Forward Community Potluck on Sunday.
Perfect.
Sam, in the PD this on MLK Day, was there discussion about ways specifically in the curriculum that we can demonstrate Black Lives Matter in this district and be responsive to, or at least discuss whether we should require Black history curriculum, African American studies, ethnic studies, and I'm just curious if that conversation happened, or is gonna happen at some later.
Yeah, so the PD, the discussion in PD around racial and cultural diversity was not directly tied to, this is a demand of Black Lives Matter at Schools Week. It was tied mainly to, as a district, we believe that it is good for all students to have racial and cultural diversity in curriculum. And so 2 of our sessions included a specific focus on racial identity and racial justice and ways to incorporate culturally relevant pedagogy and teaching and learning into curriculum across all subject areas. So our director of curriculum and instruction led one of those sessions, and then 2 of our teachers at SIS, Steve Kearns and Sam Nadolski, led a session around using math and teaching racial justice in math, and they specifically focused on a very impressive project where racial justice was the topic or the subject. And so we didn't tie it specifically to a demand at Black Lives Matter Schools Week, but we did take it as an approach of, as a district and as a community, this is something that we value. Some feedback that we got that I think is extremely important is teachers saying, we agree that it's valuable and we need more support other than just this one day of PD. And so we're thinking through ways to provide that support to teachers at the school level and within groups and at crew committee meetings, so that teachers have that, again, that support and that confidence to be able to have conversations that might be uncomfortable or might be difficult to have at first if this is the first time teachers are talking about this, and especially with students. So one, I think, piece of feedback I want to share is a teacher who reached out to me and said, I would love to talk about this. I actually have never talked about Black Lives Matter ever, and so for the first time to talk about it with a classroom, it would be uncomfortable. So are there some ways we could, so that really stood out to me of this is why I think it's important for us to be strategic, because for somebody to say Sam, you might talk about this all the time. I never have. And so for me to not talk about it in front of, 20 students, this is extremely uncomfortable for me. So just wanted to affirm that feedback and think about that as we plan for ways to acknowledge that discomfort, encourage teachers to lean into that, and then demonstrate as a district that we're going to support that and I think create a safe space for teachers to have those conversations.
I appreciate you starting from the point of this is a stated value of our district, because it is in our policy. I mean, the policies were updated to reflect more of a focus on equity. I think it might be an interesting thing for us to talk about at some later retreat, whether we feel it would be right for us to be more explicit about expectations, or not. I mean, or that might just be a good dialogue to have, because I think there is a lot of, that's an important conversation to have, to say when do you explicitly say this is core curriculum? We're going to have ethnic studies, we're going to have Black studies, but knowing that every time we require something else isn't there. So, but I know that's a retreat conversation.
So I know we talked at the last board meeting, we talked about implementing it at a young age in the elementary school. Have there been talks about ideas of ways to do that and how we can do it most effective?
Yeah, so so there are some teachers and some groups who, I won't say groups, but some teachers who have been collaborating at the elementary school level, and it's mainly around literature. So being able to, through an ethnic studies, cultural studies piece, present Black culture and identity in a positive, celebrated way throughout literature, and then using that as the start and the launch throughout the year. There's also conversations happening with the social studies department, who also have had some of the training around the teaching tolerance, social justice standards, and so the social studies departments or teachers at some of our younger grade levels are also having discussions about how to implement that during Black Lives Matter Week, but specifically throughout the year.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, thanks.
All right, action agenda items. Up first is the monitoring for world languages, 4 through 12. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. So Tim gave us an executive summary of our world languages report for the last year. Questions?
Sorry, there was a mention here that made me wonder about discussion of younger grades, of expanding language instruction to younger grades. So I just wanted to see if I'm misreading that or if that's accurate and then where that stands.
Nope, that's been part of our conversations within some of our meetings and conversations. We haven't finalized anything, which is why I wanted to note, like within this report, like this is about academic monitoring.
Okay.
And so I'll make sure to include that in that OE11 report. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get mishmashed.
That makes sense.
Tim, I had this thought after we talked about the arts, visual and performing arts conversation before, and rethinking our indicator 2 of grouping the grades 7 through 12. And while I realize some of our grouping and ends might be reduced to a concerning level, I wonder about including, you know, because in 7th and 8th grade, where classes are required versus in high school where they're not, and putting all of those cohorts of kids into one indicator, are we accurately monitoring what we want to monitor? And so I just was interested in your thoughts on that. Would it make more sense to pull out so that we can actually see kids that take this as a elective versus not? And how are we meeting the needs of students in those two different kind of approaches to some of these classes?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's certainly something that I look at. You're correct in that it does occasionally reduce an N to an unreportable public size. Right. But, I mean, it's certainly something that would give a bit more of a look into what's happening at 7, 8 versus 9, 10, 11, 12. And from a required standpoint and an optional standpoint, I can understand that as well. Honestly, I could go either way on it. It's would be interesting to look at, and I do look at it. So it would be something that we could certainly do moving forward.
I guess just as I was thinking through, like, meeting the needs of all students.
Right.
And, you know, our conversation about having a teacher come and talk about how they're grading classes, right? That might look different in an elective class versus a required class. Might look different in 7th and 8th grade versus high school. And so if we're trying to really use this data to measure and account for how our students are achieving, I'm just in thinking through those conversations, I don't know that this, to me, does that for the cohorts of kids, putting kind of different cohorts of kids and, you know, together in one number. It's kind of like, well, okay, doesn't show me much.
Yeah, and I think that's a good conversation for when we're looking, maybe doing a retreat or looking at some like results and what we want from our results. You know, I have some questions around the arts and world languages, and really, are we looking at the results like as grades? Because I think there's been some conversations about like what that's telling us. Or are we just wanting to make sure that there's offerings that are available and looking at things like enrollment? That might actually fall under more of an OE, that you have that we're requiring an offering, and that there's enrollment that's selected. If we're, you know, so if we're not, what are we doing with the grades if we're doing something with those? If we're not, then I think that is a good conversation to be able to have.
You know,
us
but given the
we'd be
importance that
looking at.
we as a district put on the arts
Mhm.
or world languages or, you know, other things, I don't want
Right.
to perhaps lose these reports, but I want to make sure they're valuable to what we're trying to measure.
Right.
And I don't know if
No, I
Yeah.
agree.
thinking through
I mean,
those conversations
Right.
that this
And that's
is-
my point,
yeah.
is just making sure that it's something that's valuable. We absolutely need to
Yeah.
be able to track. I think we just need to determine, is it enrollment, is it grade performance, like exactly what it is, to be like true to that. Because it should be stated as a value. You know, that's
Right.
certainly something that we want, world languages, we want the arts very strongly. And that should be stated through the policies.
Yes, to that point, it would be interesting to see enrollment trends also by different groups, and while we do, to your point of requiring it in the middle school, we don't require it at the high school, which sadly the norm. It's not a high school graduation requirement.
Correct.
We could make it a high school graduation requirement for our district if we wanted to. I don't know if that's something. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm sure the World Language Department would be all for it. I would be all for it as an individual.
I like your water bottle, Pablo.
You like my water bottle? I'm so transparent. I do sit on the board for language educators nationally, but that is something that we are. I guess I'm curious. I would also be curious to see, and extending this beyond world languages. One of the things that we talked about, and some of you, I think Brian, you went to the presentation at the state conference on when we see an increased enrollment in AP courses among certain demographics, it translates into more success at the university level. And we see that in world languages as well. And I'm wondering if there's a way of at least having our finger on the pulse of like who's taking our upper level classes, who's continuing on, and is there more that we can do to help guide students into these, because we know that they're going to be more successful afterwards.
Yeah, and I guess to your to respond to that, that's where I'd probably want to take a look at enrollment prior to saying, like, let's look into a foreign language graduation requirement. I'm always going to be hesitant and gun shy to increase and change graduation requirements.
Sure.
Just so that we can make sure that we're not leaving any students behind. So from that standpoint, I guess your beginning point of let's look at enrollment might be the way that we would want to start that conversation before jumping to let's change our graduation requirements.
Yep.
I just wanted to echo what Hillary brought up about trying to split up the 7th, 8th grade, especially piggybacking off your comment of enrollment too, because my guess is when it's not required, that you don't know year to year whether or not you're going to have certain levels of French, for example, until you see kids signing up.
Right.
That's my guess. Okay. And then that's impacted by how many kids were carrying it through from 7th and 8th grade?
Correct.
Okay. Because the other part of that too would be if we're looking at what we're measuring here on indicator, the 7th through 12th grade. All of them were down, right? And yet we're evaluating based on with some exceptions, but to the way that you grade these in the past on other curriculum subjects, you would say if there's one negative, you always say with some exceptions, right? So yeah, I think I'm in agreement that we got to figure out a different way to measure this one. And then the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we think about when we're evaluating this is, whether you make it a requirement or it's called world languages, but we only offer 2.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that we need to offer a whole bunch of different languages. I think we need to make sure that we keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think,
too.
yeah, to honor
If we make it a requirement, I guess is what I'm saying.
the multilingualism that exists in this district and has existed in this district for a long time. We just had Hatam here who speaks Arabic in addition to English and now is learning French. Like Hatam, we have several students that speak any wide variety of languages. There's the seal of biliteracy that I don't know if that's on the radar of the World Language Team, but it's a way of kids who speak languages that maybe are not taught in schools to have that formally recognized and honored, and then added to their transcripts so that it helps them moving forward. I'd be willing to help guide or provide connections there, but the seal of biliteracy is something that 33 or so states have bought into, including Wisconsin.
Yep. And so our ML coordinator, formerly EL, formerly ELL, and now ML, which is actually really helpful because the EL was confusing.
ML stands for?
Multi-language learners. So our ML coordinator, Roxanne Tibbetts, actually helped us complete the application for a seal of biliteracy at the start of this year. So we haven't gotten a response as of yet, but that's been put in.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask about the curriculum review? So when will this be completed? And then is the, one possibility is that we would be adopting new curriculum?
Yeah. So we are hoping to complete it this school year. And so we are currently piloting some new curriculum, mainly at our high school level. And that's through Wayside Publishing, and is aligned with the 5 C's state standards that have been adopted. As well as our intermediate schools looking at utilizing some of our action research that we offer out of UW-Madison to take a look at the curriculum we offer there, and identify areas where potentially there's some more social justice themes that could be taken on to kind of increase the amount of equity and inequity curriculum that we have within our World Languages department. So we're certainly looking at it, as well as looking at some of the structures of our World Languages department as well. So all of that is kind of in discussion. And so we still have 2 more meetings yet in February and March. And we'll kind of see from there where we're at and if we need to add more or not.
Okay.
Yep.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Up next, we have approval of our school safety plan. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So before you is our multiple kind of copies of our emergency management plan, drill schedule. I thought it would be helpful to have Joe talk through. Is the spreadsheet in here too?
Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit through the spreadsheet of
Sure.
items that you've been doing, and then some of the steps that you're going to be taking to kind of continue working on school safety?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so what you see is a safety item spreadsheet. What it basically is a list of several tasks that we want to complete prior to the start of next school year. The goal of most of these tasks is not to pretend like they haven't existed prior to now, but also really look at how we can make them cyclical and embed them into normally occurring and regularly occurring things. So some of those tasks, just to highlight a few of them, instead of going line by line with them through you, just highlight a top few. We think that it's really important to have a district safety assessment done, make that a regularly occurring thing by an outside third party. Obviously, we work with the police really closely, and they're very valuable in providing us safety information and safety assessments. But having a third party come do that and provide an additional set of eyes with some recommendations is also going to be an important part of just kind of evolving our safety practices and features at each of our buildings. So we'd like to see that happen every 5 years. the emergency management plan is a document that exists. You guys all have seen it in the closed session then now. That is a document that is evolving. That is a version that has existed since 2018. In our mind, that should be updated every year, and most importantly, be presented to you people or you guys every single year as well. The goal is to make that, again, very cyclical, a very annually occurring thing, and make sure that those updates are occurring and that that's a very living document that's getting input from local stakeholders, be that the North Shore Fire Department, be that from the Shorewood Police Department, and even Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department, whenever we possibly can, to make sure that we're getting as much information about best practices and responses to things as we possibly can.
So just, sorry to interrupt, Joe. So to Joe's point of making sure that there's an annual review of that would be something, if we're looking at OE10 learning environment, that we can actually, again, similar to what we had talked about previously, write that into one of our policies and just make that part of the indicator, requiring just a review of that plan and be able to have that as an addendum to every year. So that way it's not something you have to call for necessarily, certainly anytime if you'd like to, but then we would have a rhythm of knowing that the plan is coming before the board on an annual basis, and that you would get an annual update of, what are some things that were updated with it, and it would just be part of the reporting process.
Yep. Good job. And then a couple other things just to highlight again as you look about halfway down. We want to include language and process. This is one of the reflections that I know Tim and I have had at the high school in particular. But looking at how we make sure that the idea of violent threats is really clearly communicated to students, really clearly communicated to parents about how serious those are, about how the district would respond to those, and then about kind of some potential consequences that could be associated with those. And then part of that as well is identifying, and we've already created them, but school safety intervention teams. These would involve our local mental health people, so our counselors, our school psychs, our deans, our principals. And the idea is to help look at making sure that we are assessing incidences of safety. We're assessing potentially threatening situations, be they very minor, be they a little more major, but looking to identify and intervene on those, and then taking hopefully students who may be on the path to violence away from that path of violence. So I look at it as a very supportive role, a way to kind of wrap our arms around a student and make sure we're supporting them, but looking at it as a team approach as opposed to just a kind of one-off. So we've been working on those. We're partnering with the Wisconsin Department of Justice to look at training for that team at each building to make sure that we get the best practices we possibly can, to make sure that we're working with DOJ on those. And then those trainings are actually going to also be done with some members of the Shorewood Police Department as well, because they're hoping to implement some of those practices as well in the community. That'd be just a couple highlights off that page. I'm obviously happy to go into it more, but I don't want to go line by line unless you'd like me to.
Can you talk about the last on-site assessment?
Yeah, so are you talking about by the police or by a third party?
Yeah, so after Act 143.
Yeah, so the police went through in February and March of 2018. I believe it was early March. And it was chief and a few officers who kind of went through and just presented some of their kind of, as they would describe them, as things that they noticed that should be addressed or considered. Looking at safety, those things ranged anything from physical structures that exist in the buildings to just kind of procedures that we had as a staff for maybe in training people or for alerting people about certain issues. We took into account many of those and worked with many of those to update our practices at the time. We're actually going to go through, one of the things on here is to make that more of a regular thing instead of a one-off. So like tomorrow, Chief and Officer Tony Miller are coming to the high school to do a walkthrough and to get a chance to kind of go through the building and go through it again, look at some things that maybe have a change since that point, and make this just kind of a regular occurring practice so that we're constantly evolving our safety practices with our local law enforcement experts.
I do really appreciate that, Joe, because I just think through like what we have added in the last year with the pod, now having students there, having the changes down in the cafeteria, having the changes through the seed lab, and the importance of that, and especially as we do referendum work, how much will change and how, the importance of continuing to have that relationship with the police department for safety. And I don't think we can say it enough just in terms of, we heard it from the chief at the community session in November about how school safety is really a continuing evolving and intentional updating of things. And I think we have historically done that, but just the intention and the mindful inclusion of our students and really embedding this in everything that we do, I really appreciate, and I'm very glad that you have taken the role that you have, and just that the district has put the continued importance on this. And I think it just is the new normal for school districts. And so anything that you need, I think, from the board to support that, I hope, is a continuing conversation.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to start with the first one is down on building safety plans consistent across buildings.
Sure.
You said it's in progress here. I just wanted to make sure to clarify. We have
Yes.
building safety plans.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make sure that they're more consistent across
Correct.
buildings.
Yeah, so we have building safety plans. Every building has so what happens is the emergency management plan is a framework that kind of overlooks and provides a general expectation of how we should be responding to situations. Then there are building specific plans that have really, really specific down to specific people, specific responsibilities, specific ways things should be communicated, like really unique to that building. Yes, those exist. What we're trying to do is bring consistency to those. Not that they're inconsistent by any stretch of the imagination, but just making sure they're presented in the same way, that they're
Right.
accessible in the same way to staff, that they're presented to staff in the same way, they're presented to staff at the same times. And really just that whole idea that this is, again, more of a normal cyclical event that occurs versus like, well, we do ours the first meeting of the month, you might do yours in April, and kind of all over the place.
Can you talk about the role of the safety committee and kind of both in terms of involvement in this plan or the district or the building safety plans, and then what their role is kind of going forward as you
Yeah.
beef up?
So we have a district safety work group. It involves members from each building, involves teachers from each building, and it involves many district staff. So like Jody Brooks from rec department's a part of it. Tony is a part of it from maintenance. It is a group that is meeting, I should know the answer to this, but I believe bi-monthly currently right now. We have dedicated time to look at safety issues, and we've decided to separate them into two groups. So part of our meeting will be spent on student safety issues, and part of our meetings will be led on or held for like staff safety issues. Obviously those overlap a lot, but there also are some unique things that may apply to each. The goal is to have that kind of group really vet things moving forward. We're looking at some new technologies that exist out there that they're working through right now, and really use that group as kind of like a nice group to communicate back to the buildings on just general things that we're looking at, making sure that as we update safety practices, we can hear concerns from the buildings. So one of the things we always do at those meetings is what concerns do we have from the buildings that we want to talk about, right? So like last year, one of the issues that came up was crossing guards and talking about crossing guards. Sometimes it's pickup drop-off spots. Sometimes it's more big picture issues, like emergency signage. So that group is a great group that will be working collaboratively across the district to kind of be a filter and a group that can look at those safety concerns from each building.
Okay. One of the things I guess I'm interested if the board feels like this is a fair request and way to meet the policy expectations or operating expectations, is I feel like this this report, which is still largely template, it could be integrated with the building plans in some respect, and then made to be more comprehensive so that it really represents a holistic look at safety. There's, I think, a lot of things I was expecting to see in this plan probably exist in the building plans. So things like wondering about the pool and the doors, which doors are locked where, that aren't in the district plan are actually in the SHS building plan, I'm assuming. So, but there are some things that I think aren't reflected in this plan that probably are district issues that I think would improve it. One is there's a pretty brief section on anybody with special needs, both mobility and any other needs. Both in terms of like actually evacuating them, but also like how do you safely manage a student who's on the autism spectrum during a drill? and then like what's the role of the aide? If it's a one-on-one aide, at what point do they sort of stop and help the entire class, et cetera? So just thinking through that stuff. There are a couple other things that I didn't see, and I may have overlooked them, but it didn't seem like there was actually a protocol for a written or verbal threat or a threat that was on like social media. And that may be that you sort of are treating it in parallel with one that's made
Sure.
in school. I don't know, but that wasn't really explicitly laid out in the policy. I mean, that I would assume that that would be the same no matter the school, so it's not
Mhm.
so much in this building plan. And maybe some specific mention of like how we're like the expectations and protocol for when a substitute is in the building, like they're gonna get this kid or they're gonna get this guide, and here's what we'll tell them. There was also nothing that I could find about our now ML family. Particularly in terms of like a reunification plan, I'd imagine that the considerations might be different. Another thing in terms of tailoring to Shorewood, our students who live in Milwaukee, like I was thinking a scenario where, or actually anywhere, I guess anywhere, if there was some sort of weather emergency and it was and it happened like really fast while they were at school, then how do we make sure that they are like safe? Whereas like kids in Shorewood might be able to go home, they can't. How do we handle that? That's sort of a weird Shorewood specific thing. And
So I
then-
think, can I just like stop you for a second? So like, I think all of these are probably things that, two things. One, I mean, coming back to like where as a board we want to move with those. Like, I guess my first thought would be to, since we're going to do this third party review now, is to do that, and then as a board talk about the pieces that we want to like have and included, and then present that to like as a board, like all the questions that we want to see included, because I think it would be helpful to have the third party review and to look at some of the stuff that's in the building manuals before we right, like create a long list of things to include now. I mean, do you think that would be I mean, I guess that's what I
Or in
would suggest.
Are you suggesting in conjunction with the review?
Well, get the review.
Yeah.
See what they say, and then we sit down and look at the review, the actual plan, and then some of the places where we're like, we still have questions.
Yeah, I just assumed it could happen at the same time. Like if they're reviewing it, if you have some concerns that you wanted to make sure are in there, make sure he tells the third party.
Mhm.
That's something that I don't know. I mean, I see your point though.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, I think that we probably all would have things that we might want to like see, and I think we should discuss as a board, and then present that together. So.
When's the third party assessment happening?
March.
Well, we're working with vendors right now, so
Yeah.
we're just narrowing it down to the group that we'd like to do it. But the goal would be to have them, typically they can do it within about 30 days. So the goal would be is prior to the end of the school year, that assessment is done. So really probably prior to May.
Okay.
So it'll be done in the coming months.
And if we were to move to put this actually in OE10 for review, so I believe that is September, if I remember right, as far as like when it would naturally come up. So again, depending on the timing of when you'd want to see it, when you'd want to see revised plan, as Joe said, like this would be an evolution. So the next iteration of this plan can include many of these aspects of it. That'll be a natural thing, but it sounds like it might be something you want to workshop.
That's what I was just gonna say. If there's something that we could, I mean, she has a list of
Right.
things that she's.
Well, and what I'm saying is like, if
But
we
do
all
it-
have this list,
Yeah,
right? Then I
let's
think
put it
like,
together.
yeah,
Yeah,
Right,
agreed.
it should be like a workshop
Yeah.
type of thing.
that's all I was suggesting.
I think my only concern is time. If it takes another few months to even choose a vendor, and then we wait for them to do the assessment, it's gonna be the end of the school year, and some of these things are totally things that are easily written into the plan now, and just our goals, so.
I guess what I'm saying though is like, I think as a board, we should agree on what those goals are. So,
Well, and I would like to say I don't know that they're holes. They very well could be things that are in building plans, and I don't want to make the impression that those are the things you listed aren't things that have been thought about already, and that are in plans and taken into consideration when emergency situations could or may happen in the district. So I don't know that I agree with the idea that there are holes and that the district hasn't thought about some of those things that you laid out. So, but I do think we each have things that we would like to see, and given our other conversation, things that will change as we evolve in some of these things. So how we effectively put that into plan is, I agree with you. I don't want to wait months. This is,
The only reason I was suggesting, because I don't know enough about what the third-party review is going to show. Like, I'm saying, like, we should also be open to seeing what this is their job, right? Like, so I'd be interested to hear what they have to say before we create a whole list of things that they're like, well, actually, now you want to be focusing on these things. That's all I'm saying. So that's why I was curious. I didn't, I realize you're getting the vendor now, but.
Or what if we put that list together? Because some of them, right, the way we word them or the way we think they might be missing or we think that something's in there might be he might already have the answer to it, right?
Right.
So if
That's
we
what
give, so if we give them if we do a workshop, we give him the list of things, Joe, the list of things that we are concerned about as a board, then that should be something that he could say, okay, some of these I'm already doing, some of these I can implement real quick, and some of these I want to share with whoever vendor I took, because we know that these are areas that our board has brought up.
But I do like the idea.
But I don't think they're all going to be able to be changed in the policy before
I mean, but to Hillary's
third
point,
party.
like, we don't know. I mean, I guess my point was, like,
It's not
there's
my
probably a whole list of things that they already have a plan.
Correct.
So then it's like, okay, so what are the things that we want to, think about? Anyway,
And
I'm just thinking.
And just to clarify, I mean, I'm not necessarily suggesting, like, I'm the first person to think of any of these things. Like, what I'm assuming is that there is a protocol. It's not it's just not reflected in this. And I'm just suggesting, like, it would be a more informative and comprehensive plan if it included those things.
Right.
So
Elevating it to the
Correct.
plan level.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're
thank you for
absolutely.
that.
I think you're absolutely right. Like many of those things are included in the building plans, but there also are a couple you just mentioned that are quite frankly not. So they're good points.
I guess my thoughts on what Emily shared is, to your point, not necessarily things that, I mean, they may be missing, they may not be missing, they're not necessarily holes. I would just as soon hear some of the other things that you have found as suggestions, and not that it's going to be a mandate that you go and you do exactly what she just said, but rather to make note of it because of, they're there, she's taking the time to look at them, and let's hear them. And you might say, you know what, check. Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe we can tighten that up. And just take another minute or two.
No, I mean, and that's fine. I guess I was just suggesting, like, as a process, right? Like, this is something that the five of us are going to have to talk about, right? Like, and get more information about, right? So that's what my point was.
Right. I just don't know when we're going to have that next workshop.
Well, we'll talk about that. Clark is stuck in the United States now.
Clark is not traveling in February. But
How many more do you have in?
I don't know, 4 or 5.
Just lay him out there.
I'm just bringing them up.
Being specific about what emergencies merit a text alert and to whom and when. And which emergencies then, on the other hand, would merit like an email. I think an overall comment, and this is again probably something we want to talk about, is some of the other emergency plans that I've seen really integrate policy. Like they actually stay at the very top, like these are the district policies that the entire thing filters up to. You mentioned this, I think, in your spreadsheet, so it looks like you're already working on protocol for, I think they call them non-classroom events, right? So after school. And then it doesn't list the names of the safety committees or like
Yeah.
emergency but I'm assuming that's in the building plans, which I didn't realize were there, so that helps. Oh, cross-referencing to the code of conduct. So, like, I think threats and weapons and like possession of a weapon is like in our code of conduct, and it's probably in the building plans as well. But I didn't see it reflected in here. So, and then the other question I had is I looked back at our staff survey, and I didn't see a question on safety, and I wondered if we might research like. Because I think there's like a whole pool of questions that school perceptions like we might add that, because I want to make sure that our staff and teachers feel safe, and that we're like that may be something we consider adding to an OE.
In terms of wellness and in terms of
I thought it was in there honestly, and I looked to see like what the score was, and it's not in there. So I think it's like a generally like courteous and something environment where they can work.
But it's not like
more of a culture.
That's not like I've
Yeah.
done these drills and I feel safe.
And that's what in this whole process, that's one thing that stood out to me, because of as we currently are measuring like OE10 learning environment, it's much more around culture than it is around like threats, safety, like that type of thing. So I think that the questions just followed what we were measuring. So I think that can be a natural next step.
Well, and to that point too, do our students know what the plan is, and is that measured in that survey as well? If we're trying to embed this and be more intentional in student awareness and student knowledge of safety procedures and things that is that a question to add as well if there are
I
other
can't remember.
things?
Is that survey starts in March, right? So we should look at the.
Yeah.
I'll put it on my to-do list.
Yeah, there was one of the safety presentations that I went to here at my Hillary. This superintendent there said something that stuck with me. He said our students are. We've done drills to the extent that they feel comfortable that if they have a sub, they can tell them what to do. And I was like, whoa,
That
that's
the students can
really
tell
high
the
bar.
sub what
Like,
to do?
Yeah, like, oh, this is what we do in a lockdown drill or whatever. Which is,
Yeah.
that's a high bar, and yes, but I thought, yeah, like that's about right.
To that point, I did have a question for you about I know we're legally mandated to have X amount of weather-related drills and then active shooter drills. What are your thoughts on the benefits versus the negatives? I know there's also been a lot of criticism that they can heighten anxiety, and there's a lot of concern around that. So I don't know that we necessarily want to be the district that where students can tell the sub exactly what to do in an active shooter drill. Because of the level of anxiety and fear and then time it really takes from classes. So thoughts on that, and then along those lines, how are we preparing students for the scenarios where they flee or they hide or they fight back? And I got the words wrong on that, but the idea is this.
Sure. So the first one is the National Association of School Psychologists, in partnership with the National Association of School Resource Officers, put together a really cool joint document that looks at scaffolding of drills. They talk about what drills you should really be doing at what levels with what students. They talk about how to communicate those drills. They talk about ways to discuss and what terminology to use with those drills. And they talk about what reflections and things you can do after the drill to help students kind of process that information. I've given a copy to every single building principal in the last couple of weeks. I think that's a great document to use to just work with teachers and help prepare people for, like, this is what two, I would argue, pretty significant groups are saying is the best way to do drills and to talk about them is. And I think using that is a really, really sound foundation to help prepare us as we do drills that are, like you said, mandated. So we do a fire drill every single month. That's decided by the principal. We do 2 severe weather drills a year, typically safety week in April. We'll do 2 lockdown drills this year, and then we have to do an evacuation drill. So, I mean, that's, when you think about that, that's a lot of drills. So really talking to students about them, it varies, right? So at the high school level, it's often us talking to students at the beginning of the year about them. It's classroom teachers having conversations with students because those classroom situations may be a little different in each situation, right? So if I'm in PE versus if I'm in orchestra versus if I'm in the Copper Dome are 4 really different kind of escape plans in the event of a fire. So kind of teachers talking through with students, having those kind of intimate conversations about safety, I think are really beneficial and important. And Jack and Sadie, if I'm wrong, please interrupt me. So I think that's really important, and I think same thing as you look that down, right? So the most important thing any student can do in an emergency is listen to the instructions of their staff, right? Listen to the instructions of the teacher who's closest to them, and we want to prepare those teachers as best as we possibly can to respond in that emergency. The second piece, how do we train them to run, hide, fight? You know, I think again, what we've focused a ton of our energy on at this point is equipping teachers with those tools. So that's the ALICE training. So I've done it now twice for the last 4.5, 5 years. We had a bunch of principals and district people who went 2 years ago who became trainers, and then about 1.5 years ago we actually trained every single teacher in the district. That was a very it's a very interesting training. Bayside Middle School just did it yesterday. It's a really sound training, but it really helps provide people with confidence about what to do in the event of the catastrophic emergency. I think the idea with that already occurs at the high school, because our teachers I know are having those conversations, is having teachers again have those conversations with students. That's part of the training, is how do we talk to students about these issues? How do you respond to questions? How do you be vulnerable in those situations? You know, like the reality is if there's an active threat, like people are going to be scared. Like I'm going to be scared, right? Like that's okay. And letting people see that vulnerability, but at the same time letting people know and reassuring them, but here's what my experience is, here's what I've been trained to do, here's what training would tell you, here's what data tells us about situations, and just making sure our teachers are equipped with that knowledge to feel confident in making a decision with their students.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Speaking of the drills, I know, looking back at what we've gotten and approved, I think during School Safety Week, we've got like a debrief of those drills that just said there was like it was done without incident. Are we, it seems like we're supposed to be getting some like more detailed debriefs.
Sure.
Have you guys talked about like expanding that or doing like, I know the DOJ has what you just described.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
like,
So we
what
do
you learned.
So we do that at the building level really intensely. So
okay.
So an example would be last week we had a fire drill on Thursday, right? You guys might remember it. It was snowing a little bit. It was fun. We had variables to our drills at the high school. So Tim blocked an exit, for students. So it was a variable that was pretty simplistic, but at the same time was just kind of a different element to the drill. So after the drill, we sat down, we talked about our evacuation time, we talked about the variable that was added, we talked about what staff were where, and then one of the feedbacks we received, we actually had teachers, we talked with teachers about it, one of the feedbacks we received is that one of the exits by the pool building wasn't shoveled, right? So we had snow, it was snowing, right? But at the same time, like, yeah, an exit should be shoveled because that was impeding people from exiting the building. You know, so that's like a reflection where, all right, so let's talk. So we met with Sam Tillman and Scott, our head custodian, and talked about how can we create a plan that we make sure that exit is clear when snow falls, and that's one of the, not the first thing, but one of the very top list of items because it's an emergency access point. So we try to make sure those debriefs happen building. I think that an evolution would be to talk about them more holistically as a district, you know, about what are we seeing that are consistent issues at each building that maybe aren't unique to just the high school, but unique to all the buildings combined. I think that'd be an evolution. That would definitely be something we need to look at.
I think we're supposed to be, like, those
So-
are supposed to be signed off on, so maybe they should
So-
be on a consent agenda or something.
Yeah, so it's the lockdown drill. So when we
it's
do,
only that
yeah,
one.
it's
It's
just the
only one,
lockdown drills.
yeah.
When we do
Okay.
lockdown drills, you guys are supposed to be just getting it's actually just the board president is supposed to sign off that they occurred, and that we completed those drills.
It's like just a checkbox, like it happened.
But again, I do think a bigger district-wide conversation about the elements that we see in drills is could be very impactful, and it's again constantly evolving, right? Like what are we seeing that we can evolve from?
Regarding the ALICE training, I see in here, you put in here what the frequency of it is. And it's every 2
2 years,
years, right?
Yep.
For building principals, deans, rec department, et cetera. How do you manage the turnover of staff and
Yeah,
teachers?
great question. So, so to give you an example, what we did this past year, and I'm not saying this is the perfect plan in the world, but I think it was effective, is we trained all staff, teachers, support staff, everyone was welcome to attend, but teachers were required to 2 years ago during our back to school days. We spent a little over half a day on it. There was a classroom presentation. It was centered on data again. There were some very hands-on experiences that those teachers had, talking about like barricading a door, right? Like, and actually getting to go try it and practice it. And then there was a component of actually like experiencing, you know, like an active threat situation. Then what we did is this past fall, we trained all new teachers. So myself and Mike Joint led the new teacher Alice training. So part of the new teacher back to school week was teachers going through and having that training with other new teachers to make sure that they were on board and understood and had the same training that the previous year all of our other staff had. So that way we're trying to onboard people with that same level of knowledge. One thing that was eye-opening to me was I knew we were not one of the only schools in the area that did it, but we were kind of on the cutting edge of it a few years ago. How many of our new staff said like they had been through it once before at their other schools? It's becoming very widely known and widely used by a lot of different districts.
Is there like some light training, like you lose a teacher mid-year, and that you have to fill that position?
Yeah, so that is one that I think we're continuing to develop that plan. What Tim and I have done at the high school is we would sit down with that person and kind of take them through it in a one-on-one case. But you know, like, is that the most effective? You know, like,
well, it's not practical
it's
to do a drill just for the one
correct,
person.
but it's trying to find a way to evolve that. You know, is there a blended learning model? Is there something that we can look at that would make sense?
Okay. And you might have already answered this, but on the include language and process used for threats of violence in student handbooks, it's about halfway down.
Yeah.
Communicate this language to students, parents at start of school year, intermediate, high school. So what's different what do you do differently for the Atwater and Lake?
Yeah, so the process wouldn't change. I think the question is, and this is admittedly me being a high school, my entire career spent in secondary education. I think that conversation about how to present that information to elementary parents and students needs to happen with our elementary staff.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it. I just didn't want to list it there and then have it be like, Joe, why are you doing that, right? Like, so, but I think that's definitely a conversation. I think the most likely place to see actual intent is probably secondary, you know, as opposed to misunderstanding.
Right. I was just curious because the conversation has to be different.
It has to be, I would agree.
And then I have one last one. The very first item, district-wide safety assessment by third party. It says every 5 years. How do we choose that frequency?
So that was in talking with a couple of groups we've talked with, just have recommended that it occurs ongoing. The idea of the life expectancy of implementing changes as a result of that assessment can be anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
You know, so their point was what you want to be is constantly evolving. You don't want to be getting safety assessments done that are contradicting each other, right? Because practices change. You don't want to be having them happen so frequently that like you're told one thing now and then you do it again in 12 months or 24 months and you're told the exact opposite and then you're to do it again and you're just in this constant cycle of like, what are we supposed to be doing? You want to actually have time to learn from what they've assessed, implement what they've suggested, give time for that change to work, and then be able to kind of re-up on that.
And then that's supplemented by the annual staff reviews of the emergency
and
management plan.
And that's supplemented by the annual staff reviews, that's supplemented by the local police, like by the Shorewood Police being a part of constantly evolving and looking at things, right? So it's not like there's no safety assessment occurring.
Right.
It's more that it's happening by different people at different times.
Okay, and last one, I promise.
No, that's
I
fine.
think the assessment that's going to be done, when they do that, I know it's a physical review of how we're laid out at all the schools and everything, but they actually take our plan and our building plans, right?
Correct.
They'll go down to that detail.
Down to even some of the groups would do interviews with some staff. They've done interviews. Some groups would do interviews with some students, just trying to understand how things are communicated, how the comfort level. Again, these are relatively or pretty exhausting in terms of the example. You know, someone did an example where they might show up at a school as just an unannounced visitor and see how that transpires.
Oh, okay.
Like to that level of understanding how the district operates. Again, with their goal not being like a gotcha, their goal is to say this is how they're looking at, not like, well, what's you're going to say like ideal, this is how we do things in a perfect world. They're looking for what's happening on a daily basis.
Right.
That's what they're looking at.
Well, I kind of want them to do a gotcha, right?
Yeah,
Rather
that's
they do the
like Secret
gotcha
Shopper, yeah.
Then you guys have to experience the gotcha some other way.
Correct. But that's the idea, is that generally speaking, they're very thorough, they're very exhaustive, looking at various elements and various data points, looking at, like you said, building plans, looking at safety plans, looking at responses, looking at what emergency response teams exist, and trying to come up with as many different suggestions as they possibly can that are practical and feasible.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say this is, as a student, I mean, this is, and when more students see this is a really good thing, and this is moving in the right direction, and I'm just glad you're doing this and going to keep updating this.
Thanks, Jack.
All right, any further questions or discussion? Okay, so I have a first and a second. All in favor of approval of the school safety plan? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah,
No, no,
this is
it's
what
good.
happens. It's like halfway through.
I know.
The power shuts.
We might need to table some things, we'll see.
I'm not gonna do that this time.
Well, it's 9.
We kind of got off.
Right?
Well, it's fine. I just think that staff wellness, we can't keep them here all night. I mean, those two as well, but. How are you? Good. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. That's hilarious. Okay. Oh, okay.
Unless I bring the board book and I'm like, no, I'm coming. And he's usually like, okay. How are you?
I haven't seen you guys recruiting at UWM. You guys have enough people? You're fine. Okay.
He's been teaching at a lot of private schools in PE. So I'm like,
Cool.
bring to me.
Yeah.
So he's spoken about.
Nice. Okay. That's awesome.
We just did the K4 recruitment, or, you know, the.
Uh-huh.
And that, I feel like it's gonna be a month.
That's good.
I mean, not
We like to hear that.
monstrous size.
No, I
but
know, but
we're
still,
not open up a
any
lot.
sort of
Yeah, it's
enrollment bump, we're thumbs
They're
up.
all in panic mode about whether they're gonna get AM or PM.
Of course.
Like, it all works out.
That is stressful, though. If you need a certain one
Were you
and
here
don't
when
get it.
Tim was talking about how they do it in Whitefish Bay? You have to like wait in line at 6 a.m. That's crazy.
You.
First come, first served.
Sure you were.
I mean, that is not fair.
And I was like, all right, we're gonna get done with this game fast. And then we got here.
I mean, you can use a lottery
Short,
system, but.
actually. I think that's it.
Do they?
Oh my God.
I never.
But yes,
Why do
yes.
you, it's,
I always sent my
after,
kids
like,
UWM,
halfway through
so it
the
was
board
full day
meeting,
anyway.
It starts blowing cold air.
But I've
To
heard
keep
good
you
things
awake.
about the afternoon.
That's true. I wish it was cold during 6-hour pre-calc.
Yeah.
I wish it was cold during school then. Maybe I'd focus more.
Maybe I would sleep less.
Maybe fourth hour is when it kicks in and I'm just out cold in Mr. Kurt's class.
Fourth hour, I have orchestra. I never understood these people. 12 and 14. So I need them to get it. I need my 14-year-old to get a job.
And I was like, wait,
The laws around that are unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a little early.
I mean, she could do babysitting type stuff, but she doesn't like kids. So
Minor
no, they
detail.
don't do milestones, or like they don't do. But I have never been one of like those parents who like sign up for. Yeah, I mean the parents who sign up like now, I'm like, wow, I'm super impressed. I don't have that kind of level of planning. Like I'm happy to plan a vacation.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. It was steady. It was right out. And we all, and then
Everybody left.
No, I
distributed those guides to that helped with it. Well, I was about to go that weekend. But I just put everything she likes to go last.
She's like, oh no, I'm sorry.
Up there. Table some stuff.
Huh?
And then some people are already. No, because
Dad's gotta come here.
Or is it
Dad's gotta
my children gonna sleep over?
He's unfortunately at a work dinner with the president of Marquette. It's a work dinner.
I remember meeting him.
Right? What's his name?
That's for all of us.
Mike Lovell.
He
I have a spreadsheet every year.
Authentic Learning Showcase.
It's really? Somebody told me that this is like
I presented.
Wisconsin.
My dad
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Okay, Martha.
Yes.
Wow.
He takes them to courtside games.
People are over there.
Oh yeah.
Over there.
And my brother.
Yeah.
So Nathan feels like the king of the world. And my dad's work has courtside bus seats. So Nathan is
Yeah, I work at home, so I'm like out.
everything.
Yeah, you don't care to go to that, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he goes every time.
Lucky.
I know, you're right. Okay, we're gonna get started again.
I wish I had some.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, so up next, I will take a motion to approve the owner's rep recommendation.
And move, we accept the owner's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. So I think it was probably in December, we asked Marta and Brian to send out an RFP, get some proposals, and she gave us a summary of the costs, and seems like from the interviews you guys have gone with, is it Huffman?
Yes.
So do people have questions?
I had one, which is, did you get a sense of where they identified there might be specific opportunities for savings?
There is few. One of them would be selecting contractors, looking at the way the bids are written, and also value engineering, kind of seeing what kind of equipment is written and see if there's room for improvement.
Okay.
Peru, was this one of the companies that you had talked to
No.
in your research? No?
No.
Okay. I appreciate the significant work they've done in other school districts. I have to admit, I was a little blown away by the cost. I don't know what I thought it would be. It's a little higher than I thought it would be, to be honest. So where is that coming from in terms of things that we have been planning to do?
Yeah, so we, at our last design development budget aspect, so we had $500,000 that was designated.
Yeah.
So that was taken out of FF&E and put into for an owner's rep. So settling at 409 would be within that budget. And in fact, we can take the $90,000 that we'd have and then put it back into FF&E. So
And
it would be within the.
Did you see, I think it was mostly furniture.
Furniture fixings.
No, and I do
Sorry.
know it was furniture,
Thank
and I
you.
know they
Yes,
had
yes. No, I
indicated there was
appreciate
some cushion
Sorry.
for certain things. So I appreciate that
Yeah.
it is less than the budget. And I appreciate you negotiating the lower fee as well, so
You're
thank you.
So
okay.
when you ask, so I will say this, when I was speaking to individuals, I was speaking to school board members about their experiences, and I did speak to Sun Prairie. So, and they had good things to say about their experience. So, but I'm sure references were checked. So,
right,
yeah.
So I was gonna say, I also appreciate you negotiating down the bid from, well, it is obviously expensive. But not that I wanted you to choose the more expensive option, but from what's included in this option versus what's included in what is it, option one? How comfortable were you with, that we didn't really need those other things?
So I'm very comfortable with option 2. I believe option 1 and option 2 are pretty similar. I think that everything that we really need is in option 2.
Okay.
So I did not see the benefit of paying more money for option 1.
And then the converse of that being, was you're confident that everything is in there that we need. It's not nice to have necessarily.
I'm confident that everything we need is in option 2.
Okay.
So can you talk a little bit about now, if we approve this tonight, like what is, when do they start? Who are they reporting to? When are they reporting to us?
So as soon as you approve this tonight, we'll start working on the contract sometimes this week and hope to have it signed maybe sometimes next week, and then have them start working on our behalf. We're going to get our proposals out for bidding. I would like them to be involved to make sure they can review those prior to being sent out. So time is of the essence. I think it's important for them to start sooner than later.
Yeah, one of the bigger things we're looking at too is just the scheduling of the construction as we're moving forward. So that'll be something that we're getting fleshed out in February. We had one meeting today, but more so in February. So we'd want them to be part of that process too. Again, another set of eyes to be able to look at things.
So would there, because they're a firm, and I looked a little bit, would there be one individual from Huffman assigned to us, or how does that work in terms of?
So we have one person that will be like boots on the ground, that will essentially be a quasi construction superintendent, really kind of working through all of the details, and that'll be throughout all of our projects. So that's really what we're paying for on it pretty intensively, which will be great. And then we also have some time with like Mike Huffman himself, and that's more so kind of at budget checks, or if we get change orders that, we would give him a call to be able to look at some of those things. So we have, and then there's one other person that they use just in some of their software and their forecasting and scheduling type of thing. So there's three, to answer your question, there's three people that we would have access to. One primarily that will be on site, that will be at our weekly meetings, that'll be daily on the sites, that'll be on roofs and looking at gutters and looking at site plans. That'll really be like, Marta and Tony and my kind of right-hand man to be able to understand like the contractors and how to work with them and to be as efficient as possible. That was a big asset, I think, as part of what they could provide.
And have Myron and Epstein Ewan worked with this company before in some of the other projects that they have done?
So I know EUA is working with them, I believe, at Verona High School right now, as part of that process. And Myron, I'm not sure if they've worked directly with Mike, but in my conversations with them, they heard of him. They're comfortable working with him as they would move forward. But it's I think there's certainly some distance, which honestly I think is pretty good.
Right.
That it's not a former employee who's coming in and creating his own space. So I think we're getting a good objective. Like, yeah, exactly. Right. I think we're getting a good objective perspective from everybody that's in their crew. But also, it's also important that they work together.
Right.
That they're not adversarial all the time, because that's going to be problematic as far as the volume that we need to put out in the amount of time that we need. So I feel really comfortable about the match that we have.
What about the contract? Is that using their standard template, and then we have to make sure that all the items that we want are explicitly stated in there, or what's that process
So in
like?
past, I would always have our attorney involved in writing the contracts to make sure it benefits the school district and not the other way around.
Good answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was hoping, but I wasn't sure, so.
Okay, great. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
We have to still wait. We're not done. So we still. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, and then Marta has I'll take a motion to approve the maintenance budget transfer.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I'm gonna have you talk us through this one.
So we have some expenditures that are being currently coded to Fund 10. We would like to move them to Fund 41. Fund 41 was approved by the taxpayers in April of 2019. It is for capital expansion and improvement. So all the items on your list fit that category. We would like to free up some money from general fund in order to be able to buy a software that we talked about, and keeping track of our system and having better preventive program, in order to do that, we're gonna need money, anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000. So we're asking to be able to shift those expenses, put them in Fund 41, and then the rest of the money, Fund 41, will go into fund balance and will be designated for roof or future projects after the referendum is completed. At this point, we don't want to start any projects that are part of referendum. We just want those projects to be done first before we started doing other projects. I know there's some tuck pointing, roofs, things of that nature, but we recommend that we go through the referendum process first. If we're able to shift those expenditures, there's other items that we can complete out of general fund. One of them will be software. There's some equipment that needs to be replaced that obviously does not fit the description for Fund 41, but it does fit description for general fund.
So can I just clarify that other than the vandalism things that are listed here and the Lake Bluff car accident damage, these other things were intended, well, other than the ones from fire and water damage, but even that, the boiler being replaced through referendum funds, these were all things that were somewhat planned for and scheduled,
Yes.
just on an expedited nature now because of.
That's correct. The tennis
Mother
courts
Nature.
would be one of those.
Yep.
Part
Yep.
of that was paid for through Community Service Fund 80. And that was the other portion for what the school uses there.
Right.
We did have some items through from the state inspector for the boiler cutoff switches. Those things have changed. They came through, did an inspection, said you should have these at this point, so we needed to upgrade those. As far as the upgrades with the hardware, that's for SIS and SHS, we're moving forward in upgrading to one energy management system. We presently have two, and things are going to really tie together with the referendum at this point. We're doing a lot of work through the referendum. There's other things that need to be done too. I think we need to keep in mind we did cut $50+ million
Right.
out of that. So this kind of gives us that opportunity to complete some of the other things we weren't able to do,
Mhm.
as well as keeping that reserve for emergencies like the heating system repairs we had to do as well. So.
Can I just ask about the railing at Lake Bluff? Because is insurance not paying for that?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
So, our insurance, at this point is not paying. The reason why is because the other party's insurance is not willing to pay. We're seeing where things go. At some point, we might have to, involve attorney or go into a litigation to recover that money. Because at this time, we're not able to get any money from our carrier or from the other carrier.
Because that's a sizable chunk of change to just
Mhm.
have us incur.
Right.
Because of.
Have you talked to council yet?
Not yet. I have talked to insurance multiple times. They're still working with the other party's insurance. If nothing gets resolved by March time, we'll be bringing this back to you.
Okay.
Gotcha.
The problem is that at 25,000, how much is the attorney fees gonna be?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to think through like the, you know.
You have them pay for the attorneys.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying like, anyway.
But just looking through this list of expenses, that's one of the more
No,
sizable
I know.
ones.
I agree.
So it sticks out.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, if we have like damage from, vandalism, obviously, unless we had footage and caught them or whatever, like, we're paying for that. What's our, deductible, or how does that work in terms of getting stuff like that covered?
So our deductible is $10,000.
Okay, that's what I figured, it was like pretty high, and I was
Mhm.
wondering where, okay, alright.
Yeah.
So just to clarify then, any of these items, we're not gonna have to be going to redo and take down what we just did, or when it's in support of all the work that's gonna come later as well? Okay.
I'm just curious, when was the fire?
It was contained within the motor housing itself.
Got it.
When we first engaged a direct short inside of them, and it caused some fireworks, so.
Is that due to age of the system then? And the
No, it was due to the, we had a really wet summer, and there's groundwater seepage in the powerhouse, in the basement, and the boiler room area. That's gonna be repaired this summer,
Okay.
hopefully, as part of the referendum.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries 5-0. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a superintendent's consent agenda. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Congratulations and good luck on retirement, Mr. Cartier. Okay, public comments number 2.
Lynette Brockman, 4050 North Downer. I'm wanting to, first of all, I'm confused and I'm hoping you can clarify for me why or how you're approving the safety plan as it is tonight. I'm still confused on that, and you can get back to me on an email if you'd like. It's missing a lot of things, and it seems to be from a template that was before 2017, so it's missing a lot of the things that she listed. One of them, though, that I noticed, because I'm not going to go through the list again, but one is they changed mandatory reporting, and they added a threat of school violence to mandatory reporting, and so that's something that's not in our safety plan at all, and I'm not sure that that's been communicated to our teachers and our staff, because I'm not seeing it anywhere, and so if that's something that that's something that's not in there. So instead of going through that, I guess I will wait to see how, that gets updated or whatever you're planning on doing with that. I am confused though, like with us doing more walkthroughs and evaluations, there's still, the doors are still, and you emailed me today to say that we're not planning on changing that at all at the high school. And that's on every single walkthrough, every single security thing we've had from, Honeywell. Every single time the police chief has done a walkthrough, he's said that. I have, and I think I sent this to you guys already, when Brian presented it to the board in 2018, in his own writing, in his own list, he said the doors. And that was a priority. So I'm really wanting an answer for that, and I don't know if it's because, now you've said that that you feel that the public has not been supportive, or it's not what they want because they want a closed campus, or they don't want a closed campus. They want it to be opened. And I'm not asking for our campus, as far as being open or closed, to be changed in any way. Securing the doors doesn't make it a closed campus. So I'm still, I still don't understand that, and I don't understand why, if my child goes to the elementary school, they're in a secure building. If they go to the high school, all the doors are open all the time. There's not, and they're not being monitored in any way. But by the state, we're being asked that if we do leave the doors open for any amount of time, that we have someone at the door, which I did share with you guys. I did talk to Joe the other morning, and the last time I was here, I didn't explain it to you very well, but when we were at, when St. Robert's had that threat in the morning at 7:30 in the morning, I asked Joe, I said, and I want you guys to think of this and, and kind of walk yourself through it. If that would have happened at the high school, what that would have looked like. So, because for Mrs. Beckman at St. Robert's, it happened at 7:30 in the morning. All of her kids are coming to school. She can't really call school off. They're already on their way. Half of them are already there. Once those kids were inside the building, they were completely secure and safe, and she had control over the situation. How would that look at the high school? If Joe got a call at 7:30 in the morning, we have a threat, what would you do? and how, you know, you've got kids that come at different times. You have every door open. You know, you have no way to secure your buildings, and you have more than one building. So, and you don't have like really set ways that you're going to communicate with your staff or communicate with your students. I just like the thought of that. It's chaotic, and I didn't think twice about it when she told us what had happened, because I knew that once those kids were in that school, it was, you know, she had the control and it was taken care of. So do you as students feel like that you could block your a sub through a threat if there's one that happens? Do you feel like
What kind of threat?
if there was an emergency and it was like a lockdown, do you think you could like tell the sub, hey, this is what we do?
Well, yeah. Well, typically I would just tell them what we would do in a lockdown drill. And I think, I don't know what subs get, like, in their sub
Say
packet.
she
I
gets
think-
nothing. Let's just say she gets nothing.
Well, I don't know
She
if
just,
they get nothing or if they get
I'm telling you, like, if she comes in, she's like, oh my God, I'm not sure what to do. I just got here. It was kind of last minute. Would you be able to say, this is what we do? Do you feel, or could you just go ahead and do what you're supposed to do? And, you know, she would, and you've done, and when was the last time you guys did a lockdown drill?
At the beginning of the year.
A hard lockdown.
We didn't do a hard lockdown.
When did you do one last year? Did you do one last year?
We
When-
just do soft.
I just,
soft-
We don't do
I just
soft.
want you to just let her answer the questions, please.
A
'Cause I
heart.
appreciate that you're asking them, and I do, and I really just want to be respectful of our student representatives and that she is trying to answer, so if you could
Okay,
just let
so
her answer.
I don't mean a soft lockdown, I mean a hard lockdown.
We haven't done a hard lockdown, but I recognize that it's a difficult discussion that our administrators are working on, like if that's even a good idea for us as students, and I respect that. And
So-
I know that.
So you haven't done one this year, and you haven't.
I have trust in my teachers that if we were to be in a situation where we needed to do a hard lockdown, that they could guide me and my class through that.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I am.
So can I just, just to get, you know, I answered your question about the doors. I talked about this with Tim. This has been a conversation that's happened on this campus from before, you know, since he's been here, which is, you know, a long time ago.
Mhm.
And Tim Kenny. And so, I mean, it's one of those things where what I wanted to convey to you is that as a board, we suggest, you know, we've seen all those recommendations about creating a situation where we could close all the doors at one time
Mhm.
and students would be inside.
Mhm.
And the referendum was an opportunity for us to think about, like, would we do this? And it was very clear, and I think Hillary was probably the only other person on the board at the time, but there was no support for that. And so what I'm saying is that, like, I understand that there's fear around the idea that the doors are open, but I also would say that all the best practices talk about how locked doors are like one part of a larger piece of creating safety in schools.
But you don't-
And
okay.
so I guess I understand you're upset about that, but all I was trying to convey to you is that we asked, we suggested it, we thought about it, we created plans around it. Students, parents,
Is it
community
possible
members,
though
teachers,
that they
all
were
said no.
confusing a closed campus
No.
with secure doors?
No, they understood exactly what it looked like.
Okay, because I'm
So-
one person in this community, and I'm telling you
understand.
that I've spoken to a lot of parents that had no idea that our doors were open at the high school, and there's not one school in the North Shore, and I could probably go out a lot further, that has unsecured doors
I
at a high
agree.
school.
I mean, that's what all of the contractors said, and we said, that, you know, I mean, all I'm saying is that I understand what you're saying, and what I want you to understand is that we brought that forward. You know,
Okay.
we brought
you
that.
won't look at it again. You have no. You're
Well,
not.
but we are looking at it again in terms of referendum spending and how we are improving door locks, improving the ability to do manual locks, not have to go to
Creating a
every door,
secure
but
entrance.
to create a secure entrance, to create better access points and better security through our buildings. So I understand what you're saying, because you're right. We are not like any other campus in the North Shore. We are like a college campus. We are not like another high school campus in terms of how our campus is laid out. So there is a difference. I don't think we can compare ourselves to other high schools in terms of building security, because we're not the same as other high schools. But we are looking at a lot of the things that you've talked about, have done some of the things that you've talked about, and will do some of those things through referendum spending. And in my estimation, it can't come soon enough. But we had had those conversations through so many years of referendum planning, and the feedback we got from the community was no, we do not want to connect our buildings, we do not want to do many of the other things that were proposed.
Okay.
And so that was the message that we got.
And
I don't want, though, to give the impression that we are somehow just woefully negligent in our security at the high school. Our administrators and our teachers work very hard to keep our students safe. The board keeps very hard to keep the students safe. And I don't really agree with the impression or the statement that we just have completely unsecured doors here. Mr. Paddock, our campus supervisors, we have security cameras. We have all kinds of different ways to keep our students safe. So yes, you are correct that we don't have locked doors every day, but I don't believe that that would make our students any safer than they are right now, to be
Okay,
honest.
so the cameras are being used how? The cameras are, we don't have people to man a camera.
We
So
have,
we don't have a way to, they can't sit and look at every single exit and entrance and see who's coming in. So I think that that's not fair to say, because that's not how we use our cameras.
well, but our cameras, the cameras are viewed in the office all day long. Mr. Paddock sees those cameras at his desk all day long.
Okay,
So I don't agree with the assessment that they're not being looked at, or that they're just up there and they're just completely ignored.
I don't think they're completely ignored, but I do not think they're used in a way that we're identifying every single person that comes in and out of the exits or any door in the school. I think that would be false.
I would agree with you, but
Okay, so-
I think there is a middle there from
Okay,
what
so
you're saying.
how do you, I'm just wondering how we get around saying to DOJ that has said, we want all the doors secured, and if you're not gonna secure your doors, we want you to man the doors with staff. I'm like, what makes us, so your answer to them would be, our people in the community didn't want us to do that? I'm trying to understand how do we answer that when they've been very clear, this is what we're asking every school district to do in Wisconsin. We're gonna give you $100 million to spread out, to make this happen. We're gonna help you in any way we can. What do you say to them? I'm trying to figure out what is, it's because we've asked the community and the community doesn't
No,
want
but
it to be closed. I think that saying that I was against,
So, I mean, I guess
I
what I
think
would
we're
say is,
confusing that point, though, Brian, because the grant that we got for school safety, we did not get the full grant because of the doors, because of the community access points to our doors, and
Correct.
because of our relationship with the rec department.
And-
So I think those are two different things that keep getting
and I mean, I guess quite
conflated.
honestly, like in our conversations with the Department of Justice, they understand that local control is something that school districts have. Like every school district is different. We are also not a district that's going to put up metal detectors or
I'm
have
not
our
asking
or
for
ha-
any
no,
of
no, I'm
those
saying though, but
things.
they're not going to, their position is not like we're going to tell you exactly what to do, but they understand that
So why
different
is it
districts do different
important
things.
Then why is it important for all the other schools to have secure doors except the high school?
I mean, because we are able to do that the way the campuses were set up 100 years ago, right? So, I mean,
Would it make sense to, make that part or an explicit part of the third-party assessment and just say because if we're sort of anticipating later, we're gonna have a workshop around safety, then, if we've heard from lots of families in support and saying culture has changed in Shorewood, now we think this is a good idea, we have that conversation again.
to create a closed campus or to create change the
a key
building.
fob entry, whatever, once the new door lock, the magnetic.
I mean, I think we'd have to think about it. That's a different, I mean, that is a different conversation than what we currently have planned for,
Right.
so, I mean, yeah.
I'm just saying, if we heard from a bunch of families that, things have changed. Because I've been shocked, over even just, we've been here, now we're in our 7th year. And when we started, like Bluff parents just walked in, like left, like, you know, in the morning, walked their kids, and would sort of wander out after a while, and it was very like free and open. And I think as kids with as parents with younger kids who are younger themselves have come in and so often moved from other places, I think their expectations of building security have shifted, so that now it's like, you know, nobody questions, like, you can't just walk into Lake Bluff, because I think the cultural expectations have shifted. So maybe even in the short time since you had all those conversations, like maybe thinking is shifting. I don't,
Well-
I'm just like, so maybe we just bookmark it, like, what
And I
would it
think
take?
to that point, right, that it is an evolution of thought. I'm not one that ever subscribes to, this is the way we do it in Shorewood, so that's how we're always going to do it, right? Because that doesn't serve us very well. But I don't want to give the impression that we haven't done anything for security, nor are we not doing anything for security, because that to me is false, and it leaves parents and children in a not accurate state of mind about safety in our buildings. So I think in that way, I just feel the need to push back on some of that.
But, I mean, I'm happy to, I feel like I know what the third party is gonna say, based on other third parties that have assessed our buildings, but I'm happy to talk, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Well, and maybe it's just that, I mean, because given that it keeps coming up, and given that it's like, you know, the industry #1 recommendation, all these reports and commissions have recommended it, like, maybe that's the basis on which we say, we're gonna revisit this frequently. And keep checking with the community and saying, are you sure this is still what you want? Because every outside expert says this, we're gonna do something different, keep telling us that's okay. Because, you know, we wanna make sure that we're keeping kids safe in the ways that you expect.
The person that you guys are thinking of using to do the third party walkthrough, he's the one who, like, you know, said, talk to them, tell them, do the, you know, like, he's not gonna tell you anything different, and I
don't know that there's been a discussion or an agreement as to who's doing that third party
the
assessment,
person who you're
because
thinking
based
of
on
maybe
the
doing the third party,
but based on the
assessment.
conversation earlier in the meeting, it was going out to bid,
Yeah.
correct?
It is.
So it's
one
not
of the
one
people who you were
person.
thinking of doing, I you know, regardless, I think that, like,
I know which one you're
I think that you're not gonna see anything different, but I guess for me, like, at this point, like, because we're deciding with the referendum and the doors are one of the things that are first on there, I think that it's a good time to start a conversation, because then hopefully we can do something in a way that would work with a key fob or something in the future that we wouldn't have to redo, if that makes sense. And I think that, like, we're talking about putting in a door where you know, push a button and it locks, which is great. However, have you thought of the fact that you do have an open campus, and if you push the button and you lock all the doors, you know, and there's a child that didn't get a message or didn't get doesn't know, and there's kids that come and go at different times, then how does that kid get back into school?
Yeah.
If you don't have a key fob system, if you don't have that, then what do you do? Because that did happen. That did happen to 2 of my friends' kids, where we had an emergency, we locked the doors, they didn't get the message, and they were locked out.
So we have had these conversations.
So
Again, I mean, just to echo what Hillary said, like, all of these scenarios were discussed when we were trying to think through, like, what would make the best sense, make the most sense. And so I agree with you that, like, all those scenarios are scary. And so thinking through, like, what we want to do. But, like, I guess all I can say is that we, you know, like, we proposed these things, and this is the response we got as of now. And I'm happy to, as Emily said, like, bring it back up again. And, like, I look forward to seeing what the third party review is. But I mean, this is, you know, as we move forward.
Okay, well, and I'm not trying to, you know, like, I hope that you see that these questions I started asking you guys in November after we had that incident, and I have tried to keep all of this information and how I feel and what I'm saying, I've tried to keep it I've done what you've asked. I've not tried to make people feel like we don't have anything, but I am alarmed by the things that I found. I am alarmed that, the school safety plan doesn't include some of the things that it should. Last week, DOJ told me that you requested a copy of our safety plan. I have absolutely no idea why you would need to get a copy from the DOJ, but someone did from our district. And so there are things that have happened that I think I have legitimate questions, and I haven't really, you've seen the emails, I haven't gotten a lot of them answered. So, I'm not trying to alarm anyone, but I do think that there are some things that have been let go. They just have been. This safety plan that you guys have in front of you that you just approved was pretty much authored by one person and maybe spoken to a little bit about 4 people. And if you Google a safety plan, you'll see that it's supposed to include a lot more people than that, including EMTs, fire department, police chiefs, every single principal of the school. And that isn't what happened.
I have to disagree with you, and I don't think we're gonna come to a resolution, an agreement this evening and through this public comments. So I know that you have had lots of conversations with each of us and with Mr. Paddock, and I hope we can continue those conversations because I do appreciate the feedback. I just don't, I guess, accept all the premises through which you're making them. So I do want to, just in terms of continuing the meeting this evening, I don't think we're going to agree to a resolution or to how to proceed. I just want to say from my perspective, I take seriously what you're saying. I take very seriously this topic. My children are in this school too. So I want to be clear, though, that we are and continue to work on our plans and what we're doing and how we're going to do our security moving forward. And that's what I want to say.
To answer one minor question, I think the DPI redacted report was requested so that then we would have one that could be shared. Like it was already pre-redacted for us, so that way that one could be public, right? Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Can you
reference.
say that again,
'Cause we have
Emily?
like
I'm sorry.
We have
What?
like a full one that schools
Oh,
have,
so
right?
that was, so you wanted the redacted version so that you felt that it was something that you could put, like, that's what you used to put on the agenda packet?
If
Is
that's the
that
reference
what
to that.
you were
Yeah, I think that's
saying?
potentially,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense, but, okay. In the own safety plan, you guys had, back whenever it was written, you had said that was something that you had already planned to have done, so I, wouldn't have, it's in there, it's in the actual plan, so, I didn't think of that. So, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm David. I'm into 4400 North Wildwood. I don't know when these discussions happened or with who about that the community said that they didn't want the doors locked. Apparently they happened many years ago or several years ago if Hillary was the only other person on the board at the time. I think the elementary school parents now I don't think they're aware that you can just walk into the high school. And I think they would be really freaked out. People care as much about their high school kids as they do about their elementary school kids and their school safety. The police chief, I talked to him today, and he said that he has publicly many times recommended to the district that the door should be locked, that is safety 101. That is the first thing. Not even as like a possible violent situation, a loss control situation. I mean, you have to, do you leave the doors to your house unlocked? Do you leave the door, this is what he said to me. Do you leave your car unlocked? Do you leave the doors to your house unlocked? So, I'm not sure to say we're concerned about safety and we're doing all this stuff about safety when, your just most basic thing, is you leaving your doors unlocked. It just does not compute to me. And I would really suggest that you engage in a further discussion with the community and include elementary school parents of elementary age children, because the same as Emily, I find that post-Columbine, parents whose kids are in elementary school now have a very different attitude towards the community schools and open schooling and all that kind of thing. So I'd suggest that you renew those conversations. And frankly, the answers you get depends on what questions you ask and who you ask and how you ask them. So say, oh, come to a meeting and tell us what you think. You know, it happens at the Village. We get the same faces and the same people. Unless you really do outreach to really try to reach people, you're going to get the same answers that you probably already know, because you already see the same people in every meeting. And you see me at a lot of meetings too. So anyhow, I would really urge you to go out and ask that question again.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Sarah McNay, 2616 East Jarvis. As an active member on the referendum committee, when we were looking at connecting our buildings, that was turned down by our community again and again. I do not know what the answer is for locked doors and what that expense is, and how would locked doors work when you have to go to classes?
I don't know. I've thought
I mean, I can hear the demand for it, but I didn't see people who are asking for it also support the referendum. So I think that's a interesting dilemma.
I think that if it ever was to be like implemented wherever in the future, it just like for students to be like on board with it, it would just, I think it would have to be.
Okay, so you have a fob, and somebody can come in right behind you. I have entered plenty of apartment buildings where they do the security code, and I'm right in behind.
Well, so,
But what I'm getting at is, do we have a rational explanation of how you can have locked doors when we had a proposal for security connecting buildings, which was turned down by our community? That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Board governance. So I want to talk about linkages. I might table the WASB stuff. We'll see. Okay, a couple of things that I wanted to say about the linkages. One is we need to, and I will own this as well, like I don't take good notes when I'm in a linkage because I'm trying to listen. And as you guys will see from the notes, there's a lot of unevenness in like how much information was given and like what was happening. So I think we should, as the board, decide what the expectation is of what we're. I do want to know who was there, and I do want to know like if there are things that need to be followed up. I really appreciated actually you guys when you came last week because you immediately followed up on something that happened at yours. That's the kind of thing that I think we should all aspire to as the rest of the board. But I mean, that's something that, anyway, so that's one thing I wanted to say about that. And then the second is I think we need to think about in the spring, like what we want to, accomplish with these. I think we've done over the past, and this is really for, I think, Emily and Clark, like we've done these for the last 5 years, and we've done lots of different kinds of them in very different iterations. And have liked some of them. We used to go in with our own agenda items, and then they would share their agenda items. We would try to create a shared agenda before we showed up. We sometimes just would go and like have no agenda items and just see what people want to talk about. And I think they've all been works in progress, quite honestly. So I'd like to hear, since these were your first two. For both of you, your first ones, like if you guys have suggestions about what we could do to improve it, I'd love to hear from you guys about how we might want to improve it, and then think about who we want to meet with this spring. There's two groups that we didn't meet with in the fall that we said we would, which is one is the Senior Center / library / Shorewood Connects, and the other one was the Buy Board, which is already scheduled for our next meeting. So that one's handled. So anyway, that's kind of where I wanted to throw that out to you guys.
I think just with the student one, I think now that we've cleared up the clubs, I think it'll just having another one just be good to see other questions, because that was the main concern. So
Okay.
but yeah, that's, I think the first one went really well. So
Do you think keeping it at the lunch hour and keeping it the same format works?
yeah, I don't think there's any other way where
Yeah.
you could put it where like you can get everyone. So I think I mean I think
Just
it's
for the
all-
greatest
yeah.
opportunity
Yeah.
to meet with people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Pizza. Yeah.
We should try feeding adults. Be like steak dinner, linkage. We have so many people.
I do
After
think
the beer
for,
garden.
oh, I'm sorry, not me. Oh, I've
Oh.
gone to all these. No,
Oh.
go ahead.
So the few that I've been to, they've turned out differently, each one. And so the difficulty that I had, and this actually was one of the things that I was that I've been thinking about a lot, is the difficulty that I've had at the linkages is I don't know what the topic's going to be. And sometimes an open discussion for me is great because I talk a lot. But the problem was I would be expecting one thing and trying to prepare for that and get there and not have as fruitful of a discussion from my end that I thought I could have had. So for example, when we went to the student one, it was great, turned out awesome. But at the beginning, it was a little off for me because I was not prepared to talk about student clubs.
Yeah, we were
Right?
prepared to talk about like safety.
We were prepared to get you and I were talking about get hammered with questions about the safety incident. And so if there's a way that we can at least try to ahead of time solicit some agenda items, we don't have to have a fixed agenda, but maybe
Done that before. Yeah.
see if
Or
we
you-
can go back
yeah.
to that or.
We tried to get some things, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
like
the other part of that is getting people more engaged in them to begin with. We've got to figure out, you're not going to get agenda items from people
No.
if,
Well,
if the participation
Right.
hasn't been
If
that
it's-
good to
I-
begin with.
And
I
if we
think
asked too early.
Yeah, and then also it's just a matter of like a week ahead of time, just saying, if there's any specific policy or, like, logistic, I don't know, just basically like questions where like we would ask just, you know, an operational question.
Right.
Like, how do I do this? Or why is this happening? Like, let us know because we can have a better answer if we prepared, but
Right.
part of it, I think, is also like level setting at the beginning. A lot, if people come for the first time, often they just aren't really sure what to expect, and so they defer to somebody who's been to a bunch before, who's sort of more plugged in, and then they
Right.
just kind of wait and they don't know like why they're there. So part of it is just sort of the continuing struggle of kind of educating people about what the linkage is and what they can expect from us.
Right, because I think we need them, obviously, but how do we get them to be more effective, not just from an agenda standpoint, but getting the participation, because those should be areas where
Yeah.
people's concerns can be discussed.
Well, I think
and we can
the-
talk about them openly, right?
I mean, I think the thing that also, like, we started off, and I'm not suggesting we don't do this, but we started off really, I remember one of the first ones we did, we went and shared our results policies and wanted to get feedback on them.
Okay.
And I think the feedback we got that time was, we want to talk to you about what, like, that's great.
Right. But that's not what they wanted.
And there's a parking issue at SIS that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is that, like, we actually, like, what I want to say, in that situation, then we're like, well, Mike Joint's here. Let me tell you. He'll tell you how to deal with the parking situation. But I do think there's an opportunity, I guess, in my thoughts about this, there's an opportunity to share some of the work we're doing. I'm going to, and some of the things that even we talked about tonight, and use it as an opportunity for us to be reaching more people about the things that we want them to know about, like the stuff with children's, the stuff we're working on around equity work, right? Like, and just, like, maybe share more on that end. I don't know.
Well, and I think we've gone away from having it organized as a group, so we went from the PTOs for the elementaries to more of a broader elementary linkage.
Right.
So in my mind, it might be helpful when we advertise it to say, these are a few items the board's going to talk to you about, but really, like,
Come
that's
share.
right. Perhaps some things, some conversation starters, if you will, depending on what's happening at the time or what we want to talk about. But I don't want to totally solicit an agenda though, because I think that hasn't always worked, because then it's like one or two people sending in ideas and then that becomes the main topics that are
Yeah.
discussed for the whole thing. I think we've had great linkages and town meetings when we've done those, just in terms of organic conversations that and
Mhm.
comments and concerns that people have.
Yeah, so that's the other, I think, downside of doing, like, I like the idea, we started off doing it like we go to you, right? So we go to the meeting you're already having. But I agree with you, like, sometimes the town hall ones, actually, there's a people who come that don't see themselves as fitting into any of the other groups.
Right.
Which is nice, so then they come to those.
I do think, to get to your question about record keeping and follow-up, there's always more than one board member at each of these, so I do feel like we need to designate one of us to be maybe more of the moderator and one of us to be the note taker / follower-upper. Just thinking through, because it's not fair to Kelly to have to take all the notes and do all that. And I know each, like, to your point, yeah, I'm usually listening, I'm not taking very good notes.
Right.
But I think it is incumbent upon us as the board members to make sure that there is follow-up, or it's getting assigned to the right administrator if it's not us, or it's getting, the appropriate follow-up.
And I think, I'm sorry.
No, so that just might be one way to approach that.
Yeah, and I think that follow-up and sort of being accountable to, like, answer people's questions, follow-up, even just with a simple thank you, which I think we already do, is thank you for attending, and
Right, that's
you know,
just from
we're-
the emails, yeah.
But like, but also like acknowledging, okay, you asked this question.
Right.
Here's what we're doing to follow up on that. Here's the answer we found so far. Here's who would have more information.
Yep.
For you, or would like be open to discussing this further with you, and then, or like if it's just a simple like, you should make an appointment with your principal. Here's the number. Then I think that also like promotes an understanding of what the purpose of linkages are.
Yep.
What the board does. And then the other thing I think we should do is like, as when we do our report outs, we should say very explicitly whether there are any, we should sort of bookmark any like policy considerations. Like say somebody comes to a linkage and they're like, we should have required ethnic studies classes, whatever. And they're like, I feel really strongly about this. And then we say, okay, next retreat, like we note that came up as a request. We think about it. And I would think like most of the time there's not a policy implication, but like to the extent that we can point to where that is, and if we have a role in resolving that question or concern, then we take that role instead of just always saying, oh, well, talk to, this person about that because that's an operational question. Sometimes there are policy implications. So, and then if we can follow up to those, then people have a better understanding of our role.
Can we change the
yeah.
name of them?
If you want. To what?
I don't know. I just linkage. I don't know. It doesn't sound.
Doesn't sound like pizza party.
No.
I think we should just call it pizza party.
I don't know. You guys probably already thought about that.
Think about it.
We have.
We're gonna
But if you have
keep
a suggestion.
Yeah, you can keep thinking about it. So let's talk about which ones we're going to do. I also wanted to. So I always want to add one, so we have to think about this like, probably a little bit strategically. I wanted to add SIS students. So.
Didn't we already do one for SIS?
Yeah, just general SIS.
That was just, that was the SIS, parents and students.
Like your brother could be on it.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder too if you do it in the same evening with the parents, to, a kid linkage and a parent
Well,
linkage.
they have lunch.
Especially for SIS.
I think that'd be a
That
good
place is
idea.
little.
Or do it at lunch.
Yeah.
Happy to come at lunch too for SIS, but
That
I
could-
do think
I-
that would be a good one to
that's a
add.
good idea.
Okay, so that's one I wanted to add.
I also like the aspect of town halls that you pointed out, and and I think I would like to try to do the like Facebook Live or some
That was
online
really good
version
how you did that last time.
before, or again just to.
Oh, at the linkages, you mean?
She did it at one
Yeah.
of the town halls. So do you
Yeah.
guys think that
Oh,
we
really?
could?
That was really good.
That's fun.
Okay, so, are we gonna do all the buildings again? Elementaries as one, SIS and SHS?
Combine elementaries.
Yes.
Well, we did a morning and then
Yeah,
an evening,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
How was attendance?
Low for the evening one.
Was it?
For the which one?
The evening.
What about the morning one?
Morning
Low
one was
too?
good.
That was
no, the
good.
morning one was pretty good.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the one, well, I mean, just looking at attendance for the advanced learners and the parents of students with disabilities, I think is a good one to have. I think, just looking at what we did in the fall, I don't know that there's any to necessarily not do.
Yeah.
So if we,
You're adding, not replacing.
Well,
Right.
so I'm.
So
get-
I'm
what do you guys
wondering-
think about changing the school ones to town halls? And not having like specific elementary SIS and SHS, but like pooling them together? I don't know.
What if we did just do one elementary morning linkage this spring and then have an evening town hall and make sure elementary parents have like a special invitation if they couldn't make the morning one to come to the town hall?
And invite
And have
SHS
that.
and SIS
The town hall would
parents?
be SHS and would be everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
I would like
But in
to.
it, I'm sorry.
No, I just timing of these, I would like to suggest that we spread them out just a smidge more, which might help a little bit with attendance and with our sanity,
I
if
mean,
we can.
I know, but you know
Um,
what's gonna happen is, I mean, like as soon as we get into post-spring break, it's like every night there's something.
That is
you know?
true.
So, anyway, I
But
mean, we
that's
can.
where Emily's Facebook Live comes in, because then it's easier to.
And we'll,
log
I'm
in
sure
and-
Kelly can figure it out, but.
So if we start now, I mean, or start soon too, we can get in a couple before spring break.
Were you
Right.
suggesting the town hall one to replace SIS and SHS?
I was.
You were. But then your comment,
No, like invite them,
Yeah.
like call it a town hall and then just have all the schools invited. Parents, I guess, whatever.
but
you
do
know.
one separately for the,
Morning.
Yeah, morning,
Yeah.
I mean, we could call it just
Elementaries.
morning and evening.
I think that might, I think there's a good argument for that because parents with elementary kids are more likely to have babies and have a parent who is at home. More likely, not always the case, but sometimes. And then SIS, SHS are more likely to have a teen at home who can be left alone at home while they go to this evening town hall.
I mean, I think it's just having more opportunities. Like, I don't know if we can, we don't know what people's, you know, but.
I do appreciate though when little ones are at the linkages, just it reminds us why we do this. So there's no harm in bringing children to linkages if you need to, because that's, you know.
Okay, so
SIS students we're adding. Town hall we're gonna.
Yep, okay.
Replace.
And we'd also talked about some of the district leadership team or the school leadership teams. And
Yeah,
how would
so
we roll them into it.
I was wondering what you guys thought about, we never really got to a place of understanding like if and how the SEA and us would have a linkage based on our last meeting.
Yes.
So we still need to do that. But then I was also wondering kind of if we should, getting at the question about like not just meeting with teachers that are in the executive committee of the SEA, but also like more broadly, and maybe going to each school has a leadership team. And Brian thinks that they would be okay with us, like one or two of us going to that, and then, you know, like being part of that conversation. So that we were part of like a, you know, just like seeing more teachers
Well, the other thing too that.
versus having like a big teacher meeting, staff meeting.
Yeah, I think we just want to identify the purpose of that. Like
Yeah.
be clear on kind of what the intent of that is. And define that.
So the linkages with teachers has up, and correct me if I'm wrong, like linkage with teachers so far has been with the SEA.
Yes.
Okay. What about teachers who aren't a member of that union?
Right.
Right?
We don't know, I mean.
That's the question.
That's
So,
one of the questions.
could you do a linkage with one, with both, offer both? If that option is not.
Sure.
Yeah.
For-
Yeah, I mean.
You mean like just open it to everybody?
I didn't know if there was pushback or if that's already been considered or what.
So for purposes of wrapping up, do we make a list of all of the ones we're considering
Yes, I did.
and put out what it, because once we always see that in writing, it's
Yeah, we're gonna need to see the
sobering,
volume of
just
it.
in terms of what's reasonable. I'm almost thinking I like the idea of just doing like 2 or 3 town halls, 2 town halls or something along those lines to cover the broadest population. In reflecting on public comments this evening, I do think I like the town halls for the purpose of that we get a lot of people that would not go to
Yeah.
a morning linkage or an afternoon linkage, more broader community members. So in some ways, I'm wondering if that's a better approach, and perhaps we can think about that.
And I could, if you all are amenable, like, I'd be happy to draft like a sort of template for notes, like just, you know,
Sure.
who we need to
Sounds
follow
good.
up with, who's gonna follow up, et
Yep.
cetera. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll do that.
So it's
Okay,
consistent
so
from
I will
each.
work with Kelly to create the list and get back to you. I wanted to ask you guys while we're here. So the buy board meeting is next meeting. So agenda items. That's from 6 to 7. We don't need to do anything around the crossing guards, right? That's been handled. So there's no like
Traffic and parking
the parking update? Should we ask for
So I
that?
think this Thursday, I think that goes to the village.
Okay.
So you wanna add
boards.
that?
I could put that on there.
What about, any feedback they have on I'm trying to blank on that. The name of the series that they're doing. Citizens.
Oh,
The
Citizens
Citizens
Academy?
Yeah,
Oh.
because there was one that you're gonna be invited to, right?
Yeah, I'm presenting. I've done that.
Which one is that one?
March, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be after.
That'll be after.
If we have topics, can we send them to you prior to the?
Sure. I'll let you know. I mean, I'll talk to Allison and see what she was thinking, and then I can share that with you guys and see what we're thinking.
That already happened.
It's just you have to approve the minutes. We do that every.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's that. So normally we would have a candidate, not normally. On the work plan, there's a candidate orientation for people who are interested in running for school board. And I was thinking I would work with you and Rashonda to do that, since you never really had you've had some orientation, but
Yeah.
do it again. So
Okay.
I'll work on those with you too.
Is that orientation to the board or orientation to running for the board?
The board.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Yeah,
You're on
no,
your
I
own
would-
for running.
No, that's what I was asking, because I would appreciate more. I would
Okay.
appreciate that, yeah.
Okay, so I'll do that. Brian, did you go to the seed meeting?
Yes. So quickly, the seed meeting, so the current annual campaign is up to $88,000. So we thank all donors for their contributions at this point. The big event is coming up. So the Swing with Seed event is on Saturday, March 7th. So everybody could mark their calendars for Saturday, March 7th at Discovery World, downtown Milwaukee, for the Swing with Seed event. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. So we hope to continue the success of that event.
Okay. So I'm wondering if you guys are okay with us tabling the convention reports, unless there was something really pressing that we needed to talk about?
I support that because I was unable to add my presentations.
I support that, because we could talk for an hour at least.
I know. All right, and then I left on here from last time, we had the discussion about whether or not we were going to do a resolution on Black Lives Matters Week. And so I left on here kind of just a conversation about what we want to do. So I guess what I'll say from my perspective is, in thinking about this, thinking a little bit about what Sam said, I think when I think about what the board can do to demonstrate to students that Black Lives Matter is really to continue to work on, to carve out the time to work on our policies and make sure they're in line with our goals around equity and being anti-racist. And so, I think that's, to me, where we can spend a significant portion of time and show this is what like, this is how we do that in our position on the school board, is to, like, you know, make sure it's explicit in what we say we value and what we do in our policies, and support what the administration and staff want to do. So I don't know if you'd have further conversations about the resolution.
I mean, my thinking is pretty much what it was at the end of the last meeting, and echoed what, you know, Sam said. I think, you know, barring hearing from a bunch of students, that it would be, like, really important for us to pass a resolution. I think that would be, like, the one thing that would change my mind. What I'd like is to be able to, a year from now, pass a resolution that includes an accounting of our progress and actual, like, systems change and policy and operating expectations that have, you know, been adapted, or have come to fruition, that reflect, the goals of the movement and the demands of, Black Lives Matter in Schools Week. And then the, like, layout, I guess, like, here's how we're supporting the SEA, or, you know, and that is co-signed by the SEA, that they also sign on to that, so. I just hope, I mean, it makes me a little nervous to say, like, we're gonna put this out a year, because I worry about, like, on my own part, losing track of progress, but, I feel like I hear that everybody in this room supports it, so, I mean, and I know obviously we have other, community members holding us accountable to that, so I'm optimistic we can do better next year, and, you know, have something really concrete to point to.
I hear what you're saying about your, sounded like you were kind of hesitant. You understand, you support where we're going with this, but you were hesitant because you still feel like, you know, you just don't want to lose sight of that, right? And I think, I would imagine a lot of us feel that way too, but one of the things that helps me is when we hear Sam echo what you just said about why it's important to step back and make sure that we highlight those things that we actually do to support whatever that resolution is when we get to it.
And I think we need to start that conversation earlier, like,
Right.
before, you know, and particularly with teachers, like, if we're asking them to, like, teachers union to co-sign is like, do we share this value, or are we really working toward this thing or not? And if we can't co-sign to this value, maybe we just say, like, well, here are our values, and I don't know.
Well, and we can make sure that to Paru's point, just make sure that what we do there from a board perspective is a foundation for that, and participate in everything else.
I think that, like, putting it out a year too, it might have a benefit, because when we talked about the books, implementing those, I mean, take time for that. I honestly think that that's gonna have a really big effect on, like, seeing change. Like,
The
I think,
books?
yeah, I think that's gonna, to me, I think that might do a lot to help. So, I mean, I agree with Emily, like, seeing a year out too, just.
How about you, Sadie?
Yeah, I agree. I think literature is just so important that, yeah,
Do a lot.
giving it time.
I liked what you said, Hillary, last time, so I mean, there's a part of me that feels like if we're not going to officially put out a resolution, that we say something about our decision on that and why and what we are doing as a board. So, I mean, we can still do that. I can work on putting something together, that we send out to parents, so. But I do think it's important to, like, be really clear about, because I do think, what I took away from last time's comments was about being, more than, doing it for more than just because this is the kind of thing we would do in Shorewood.
Yeah,
Right?
or
Like,
just, like, doing it more than just, like,
or just saying we're
acknowledging
doing it,
Yeah,
but, like,
right, just
what is
doing something.
the intention behind it? And so, and like I said, I think as a board, we have specific intentions that we are working on, and I think we can say, as a board, we will commit to the hours that it will take to get this done, and the support, whatever that looks like in terms of resources and other things to get it done, so, but I do think that there will be people who are disappointed that we're not doing it. I mean, maybe it won't be like a bunch of, students coming to us, but I do think people will be disappointed, so I just want us to maybe, we can think about if we wanna say something about it, so. Okay. All right, I'm gonna take a motion for the consent agenda. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public comment? Okay. To do. You wanna start?
Yeah, for me, I was just taking notes on the evolution of the safety plan, so just being able to work with Joe specifically on some of the feedback that Emily mentioned tonight, and if we can get some time scheduled for a workshop or retreat type of structure, I think, then I think we can all provide that feedback. But as Joe had mentioned, he's doing some follow-ups with some people tomorrow, including police chief, so just continue to evolve that plan as we go.
Okay, and then I have on mine to talk to Allison about the by-board agenda. I have notes to add that we want to put in some new indicators in OE9 and OE10. I'm going to find out when the perceptions data survey is going out, so we all can look at the different things on that. And I will bring back a linkage list for the next meeting. I think that was yeah. Okay.
I'll bring us a notes template before our first
Yes.
linkage.
Any future agenda items?
I have one.
Yeah?
So I think the rest of the board was CC'd on a conversation we had that I think needs to continue around your governance culture and practices, and when we, and to what degree we visit schools. So.
Okay.
that should be future agenda.
What about the audit?
That's at the next meeting.
Next
So he
meeting.
couldn't come to the, sorry, yeah.
You're so excited about the audit.
I'll just go directly to Marta.
I bet Marta is excited about audits.
Talk about
She-
the
All right.
audit.
she actually-
Thank you.
Nerd.
We're in recess.